Welcome to Laid Back Law with your favorite lawyers from around the interwebs, discussing the most pressing of topics every Friday at noon Eastern Time.
All right, I'm back from Las Vegas and hosting the show again. And to start things off, we have a new lawyer amongst us. It's known as Pisco Litty. Am I saying that right? Pisco Litty?
It's Pisco, but you can call me Pisco. Some people like to pronounce it a particular way, but thank you so much for the invite, guys. My channel, we're big fans of Laid Back Law.
Okay, no sarcasm involved here?
No, not at all.
All right, well, tell us about yourself real quickly.
Yeah,
I like
sure.
to get people to...
I pretty much started streaming more regularly this January. I have a background in law. I'm a lawyer, an attorney in New York. I definitely come up from a more left-wing perspective than some of you guys. But yeah, just happy to be contributing and collaborating with people. And yeah, we're big fans.
Yeah, you strike me as the CUNY law type. CUNY law?
Wait, CUNY law? Nah, man.
CUNY?
Man.
Not CUNY?
Listen, no, not CUNY. But no, listen, guys. I'm happy to provide the left-wing perspective, the pushback that you guys sometimes, I feel like, need. No, Nate does that a lot of the time. We respect Nate when he gives the pushback, but sometimes you need even more left-wing pushback.
Hey, it is what it is. And I do want to have alternate voices on there, and let me address that really quickly. I've never wanted this to be an echo chamber. First off, I'm not a lawyer, so I can pretty much say whatever the hell I want because it's not like I have any professional responsibility. But I do want different voices, and I've never actively tried to prevent a voice from being here. And if there's other left-wing lawyers or whoever else, and you want to come on in good faith, because I don't want it to turn into just everybody yelling over each other because that'll give me a headache, then yeah, please, it can get quite robust. We have it even amongst ourselves with people who are often on the same side, and you'll see it today. I have a funny feeling because some good cases coming up. So I want to start out light because I think this one, I just want to see where everybody goes. Everybody, I feel like, should be in agreement on this, but you never know. It's a free speech case. A judge has just ruled that parents or whomever cannot wear XX wristbands to silently protest trans athletes and high school events. Now, my personal bias is this is ridiculous. They're silently protesting and wearing a band. That seems to be free speech to me. What say all of you?
Has anyone heard of Tinker? Is what I have to say.
This is Tinker. This is Tinker all the way.
Yeah. The fact that it's an adult versus student shouldn't change it. So Tinker, for those of you who don't know, famous case, students wore a black armband. I think it might have had the piece on it, not sign on it, not sure if it did either way. But they wore a black armband to school to protest the Vietnam War. And they said you couldn't wear it. And the Supreme Court said, yes, you can. You don't leave your rights at the schoolhouse gate. So yeah, basically this is just Tinker all day long.
Now, what about the idea that, and there's been precedent since then, that if the outfit, the clothing, the speech is distracting and interfering with the operation of the school? Not saying that this does, but there are some restrictions to that.
What if it's hate speech?
It's a great point. Like, what if it were? You wouldn't allow a swastika. Fair? That's too disruptive.
Right, it's too disruptive, and it would cause a disruption. And in fact, my son's school, there was they have an overhead projector sort of thing, Elmo, and someone drew a swastika on that, and it was totally disruptive, right? So if the action is disruptive to the function of the school, there are some
bouncing this around.
Sorry, I have the I was trying to put the Brandenburg standard so people get that.
There you go. There you go. There's Tinker.
There's Tinker.
Yeah, I'm sure the school in Tinker thought that was disruptive too. So yeah,
right.
I think it's important to note this is only for an injunction stage too. So this isn't a final ruling.
It's still wrong.
I understand, but I think the way that it's listed is the way the article's titled. I think is a little.
I think it's wrong, and I think the idea that it's disruptive is BS. But I just wanted to counter the tinker argument with there are some restrictions, right? We have to acknowledge that.
Well, what if it was a T-shirt with, say, a lynching on it? And I'm deliberately playing devil's advocate here, but some sort of like really gross thing on it. Would that be okay?
Well,
And
I have
I'm
another
for free
case.
speech, but
Bongs for Jesus.
Bongs hit for Jesus.
well, that's celebrated.
No, but I'm saying it shows the limits of this rule. Like you can go but so far, but if it starts becoming obscene, then obviously they can restrict it. So,
can I ask you guys a question? So, if they straight up put on their armband, "I hate trans people," could they ban that?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
What if it said, "I hate black people"? Could they ban that?
I think
I
they
don't
could.
think so.
I think they could. I think they could say that I hate
Yeah.
trans people or I hate black people is disruptive enough where we don't want that. I think that would be upheld.
It
That would be
depends on
consistent.
really the response to it. And I think and I can't remember the case, but it's really, and Kurt, I'm sure, has it at the top of his Rolodex. There was a case where they analyzed the disruption, the effect that it had on the school and the other students at the school and the ability for the teachers to teach the class. And if everybody ignored it, then there would be no disruption, right? I can't remember the case.
But I don't want to give a heckler's veto either. I don't want to make it so just because you have a strong reaction to something. Like imagine that you have a strong reaction to the peace symbol. You essentially kind of make it a fait accompli that it's going to be incredibly disruptive just because of your reaction. I think we should be more looking at kind of the objective the characteristics of the message and our priors about it. And so in this case, I haven't read the briefing, but I'm pretty deferential to schools. I'm curious why you guys aren't just accepting the Clarence Thomas vision, which is that there are no rights in these kinds of instances for kids.
Well, and that's
this is the parents, not the kids.
He's wrong. Yeah,
by the way.
he lost 9-1.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
Well, yes.
I guess that's fair.
For those of you who don't know, Clarence Thomas, there was a case with the cheerleader who said something on the weekend and they kicked off the cheer. So it went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, yes, she has free speech rights, put her back on the cheer team. And Clarence Thomas said, no, she doesn't have any rights in school. This is all BS and blah, blah, blah. So he was the lone dissent in that case. So
Yeah, he was wrong.
I'm pretty deferential to the schools here, and I agree that there's it's good law of the Supreme Court that there are free speech rights in these contexts. But if you can find some kind of neutral way to say, hey, anything that could be conceivably construed as targeting other students in the actual school, that can be banned, I'm pretty deferential to that. I'd have to read the briefing, but if it were I hate trans people, I think I want to get answers from all you guys. If it said I hate trans people, could you ban that?
I would say yes.
I'm going to say no.
Make an argument for it, yes.
If it's political speech, I'm going to say no. If it's targeting a specific student, then yes.
Fair. That's interesting. Yeah.
So you can literally say, I hate black people or I hate trans people, and you think that that's protected by the First Amendment and they should be allowed to wear, and even despite how disruptive it might be.
I think you have to be consistent on both. So if you say that you can say it for trans, you can say it for black, you can say it for Jews, technically.
I hate white people.
So,
I hate everything. Yeah.
I hate whatever. I hate white people. That's a free-for-all. They, everybody seems to have no problem with that, no matter what.
I have a problem with that. I love white people.
Well, good. Thank you.
It's actually like even slightly worse than that, because I imagine this school would allow you to wear some sort of trans flag armband. So it's arguably viewpoint discrimination on top of everything else.
That's very true.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
I read a little bit of I read a little bit of the opinion. The court actually distinguished those two things because he said, like, yes, you could have, the pride flag, and the reason was they were protesting. The other school had a trans athlete on their team, and this is at a girls' soccer match or volleyball match. Something. That's why they were doing it. And he said the difference is, he said there was a difference here, that the pride flag was inclusive, where he started to show the armbands were meant to be exclusive or to,
Rubbish.
limit.
Rubbish, I said. Rubbish.
That's what he said. I read through it a little bit while I was in between. I had some hearings this morning. That's what it was.
Crafting an argument to support your opinion.
I think so. And I don't think that's probably I don't know if that'll.
What about the intent here? What about the intent? So if there is
Yeah.
I think I like that argument a little better, Sean. And I think that these are great points. I'm glad someone read the case. I wish I knew about it, but I think it's a good point. If there was like a movement to specifically make a person on another team or someone in that school feel bad, I feel like that's a different case, and you could have a lot more leeway in terms of what you're going to ban.
Well, hold on, it's not necessarily to make somebody feel bad; it's to uphold the women who are getting knocked out, who are getting pushed aside. So somebody could argue the exact opposite to you and say, "No, I'm not anti-trans. I'm pro-women, and I don't appreciate males taking that female role." And that's what they're arguing right here. This is for women.
But hold on,
not to go against them. That they can do whatever they want wherever, just not here.
So he did start to address this, and he said if it was clearly targeted, he said that would be a big problem. But he said even in this situation where they're not specifically protesting that, it's just the idea, not the kid. This is where I think he starts to get a little weak in his argument. That the people that feel this is directed at them feel it's directed at them, then it does become an issue of if you feel you're being targeted, then that it could be the school could say this is a targeting message. That's how the person feels. And I think that gets to be a little.
I'll ask you, Judge. You tell me, how can I express my political viewpoint in a way that won't target them? You tell me what the approved ways of doing this are.
I hate the feeling. If they feel like it was directed at them, then you can't do it. I hate that.
Come on.
But do you agree with that principle at least? Do you agree with that principle? Let's say that the evidence is so strong that, we want to make her feel bad. They even have those texts out there and they say this is about making her feel excluded. Like it's that blatant, right? If in that case, if it were like that, you would buy it, right?
Yeah.
Not even then?
Buy that. And a directed targeted campaign, yes.
It still is up in the air because at the end of the day, if it's a general protest against it and for women, and even if your goal is, hey, we're going to do it during this event because this other team has a trans person on there, I don't think that's enough unless you say, I'm not going to say it on YouTube, but you could say some things that could be very clear that
they're race realists. Okay, it's a school filled with race realists, and they're like, this other guy has a black person on their team, and we know that it's so unfair to have race mixed teams, and so we're gonna all get together and we're gonna say, we're gonna wear no black people, no color mixing, and I'm using the term because I'm trying to make a really offensive example. And they go up to this to the event, and they're all wearing that armband specifically to target the black student on the other team who they don't want to be competing with the white students.
All right. Here's my response.
We're not there, though. You're having to dig all the way into hypothetical land now to support a point. Whereas this point right here, this point right here of there's 2 X's on an armband. It is very vague.
I know. I'm
specific. So
I'm trying to push you guys a little bit. I'm trying to push you guys to see the limit.
The problem is that as lawyers, we all look at these things in a contextualized way, right? Even with the stabbing that recently happened, right? In one context, it may be justified in another context. So it's like you're asking us to give us a principle that works in every situation, and we're just not going to do that because obviously in a situation, the more extreme situation, different principles apply than in this with just 2 X's on an armband.
Yeah. I think the way I'd answer your question is that there has to be a valid way to express the idea.
How about calling Kaepernick socks?
Yeah, I don't think the government can limit you in terms of the idea you want to express. Now, if the particular way your shirt is designed or it's particularly graphic or particularly distracting because of the nature of the design, I think that's one thing. But if we're actually getting to the underlying idea itself, I think there has to be some valid way of expressing the opinion.
If you put a menorah and then put a cross on it now, so now they're saying Jews have an inherent biological advantage or whatever.
People are allowed to think some stupid stuff.
Yeah, I can prove that to you all. Just go read X. That's already out there. So nice try. Well, okay, here's another example of it. The real one. What about calling Kaepernick socks? I mean, come on, that's pretty offensive. The little piggies and the police uniform socks. That's very, very on point. But technically, that's free speech, isn't it? So, hey.
But what if Colin Kaepernick were a 12-year-old?
Context here.
What if it's not, though? This is the adults in the crowd, by the way, not the children. So we still need to be on point.
Yeah, I would want to read the briefing. I think there's some good arguments on both halves. Yeah, but I do respect the fact that listen, I'm a First Amendment big supporter guy, but I just recognize that it's different in the school, and I'm going to be very deferential to school in many instances.
Big supporter guy. What?
Big First Amendment supporter.
I don't want the school to be able to punish people for the wrong thing. That's the problem I'm trying to ultimately solve at the end of the day. People need to be able to think what they want, like to think in their own head and have opinions that aren't the state approved opinions. And I think they need some method to be able to express their opinions that aren't the same as the government's opinions.
Well,
even
you know what?
How about even if those are stupid opinions?
How about just uniforms? Call it a day.
I think that would be neutral. I think everyone here would agree that would be neutral, not viewpoint discrimination. Yeah. But so I'm curious about that. So if a school, for example, were punishing, or the government were punishing schools or students who were against the war in Palestine, you think they couldn't do, for example, I don't know, let's say deportations or restricting funding for schools on the basis of people's expressed views for let's say even Hamas.
Not on the mere expression of the views. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Mere expression of views is not.
So we're going to condemn Donald Trump for what he's doing on all these college campuses and restricting funding on the basis of their students.
It all depends who you're speaking to. But like me, I'm with you. But a lot of but I also want to point out too, free speech is protected in different places in different ways. For instance, at the strip club cases, women can wear pasties in a G-string, right? The strip club cases where
I don't know those cases. You got to tell me about those cases.
The Supreme Court says that
he's a big supporter of strip clubs.
That's right. I am.
Oh,
in strip clubs, the Supreme Court has ruled that pasties in a G-string were an erotic message, and that strippers can convey that erotic message to customers in that environment.
Yeah.
But if your school, if a child goes to a school wearing pasties in a G-string, you can't say I have free speech rights. Look at this case, right? Because the context is totally different. So I do understand where you're pushing us to, but I think context matters a lot in these situations.
That's a great point.
All right, to shift to another topic, I saw in the chat everybody's commented. I can't ignore it. Yes, Nick Rikiada was sentenced to 30 days in jail. I think 5 years probation.
Wow, aggressive.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Wow, they went to the wall. Damn.
It is what it is. I wish him nothing but the best. If he is not currently sober, maybe when he spends the time, it'll help him.
Now I'm still of the position. Looking at the order that everyone's
28 days. Sorry, because he got two.
It was 2 days between friends.
It looks like he might be able to get a deferral on that if he completes probation, because he's not supposed to appear until August 1st. So they're giving him time to jump through a bunch of hoops, and then the sentencing, the jail time might be deferred, at least according to the order.
Well, maybe rehab. I mean, I'm just saying, if there is an issue, maybe he can go to rehab, and that can help.
Is it his first offense? This is his first criminal offense, right? I don't
think jail time.
I think he may have already gone to
rehab. But it would be suspended pursuant to successful conclusion of a bunch of hoops and probation. And that's what it looks like, but I don't understand Minnesota orders. Mine in Michigan would say specifically that. This one says possible deferral pursuant to probation. So who knows?
I haven't seen it, but I still think even putting 30 days on him, I still think that's a bit much.
That's a bit much.
Necessary.
Yeah, it's a bit.
Yeah, much. I don't think it was necessary at all.
Get better soon, Nick.
5 years probation is a lot of probation, man.
Yeah. Well, we said 2 or 3. Yeah, we said 2 or 3, and he got 5. I was like,
well, and if the probation is just literally stay clean, stay healthy, it's not necessarily the worst thing out there,
right?
Being that long of the government being on you like that's probation, even when you're non-reporting, is still not you got to get permission to leave the state. If you run into the police, you got to tell people. It's still a hassle, and
your audio is. Am I the only one who's getting
audio? Is awful.
I didn't want to say anything.
Sean's audio is almost always bad. I don't know what it is, but
I got court this afternoon, so
you sound like you're underwater.
Yeah.
Yep.
But listen, I do want to ask you guys, do you guys think this is a little bit of FAFO in terms of Nick because he fought so much, he pissed off the judge, he pissed off everybody there. And then eventually it's like, you know what? F them. Let's give them the 30 days. Because they didn't usually, now, as a prosecutor, usually you give your recommendation, the defense, and the judge kind of like, all right, we'll give something in the middle or something. Usually it's in New York, it was very defendant.
You mean when they taunt judges, it might piss them off?
But it seems like this judge was like, give them the 30, whatever the prosecutor wants, we want too. So I think it was a little.
But don't you guys miss him? Don't you miss your old buddy Nick? I mean,
I do.
Let's get back to the debate.
Yeah.
No. The world misses Nick Rikiada.
There you go. Nick used to be in the intro on this. I mean,
did you do the old Stalin? Did you stall him out of the intro?
Yeah, no. Okay, you know what? I want to address that.
You did. You stalled him.
Okay. Well, hold on. Let me address that.
Trotsky. Who?
Nice.
There was no Leon.
All right, Joe was the other half of the intro.
That's why.
They were both drunk out of their mind, making a comment about me, and I thought that with funny. Nick's case and everything else, maybe it wasn't the best representation of having a very obviously drunk Nick as part of the intro, reminding everybody every week. I just thought that
you just beat every single lawyer on the argument there.
No, he did. Well, look, while his case was pending, fine. But now that it's resolved, I don't know. I think it's play the clip right now. Just play it. You have it there.
Play it.
We don't do this. Eric Hunley has the whole monopoly. I don't know who that son of a bitch thinks he is, that he's got this whole monopoly on getting panels of lawyers together. But we should be doing that on our streams, like way more. I
did this way before him. I had the big brain panel before Eric Hunley even existed.
See, and I loved that. I loved it. It's just like,
yeah, but why don't you re-record it, Joe? You guys can re-record it, all right? This time you can do crack.
Yeah, get up on it, Joe.
Anyway, I just didn't think that was necessarily the best representation,
especially when he's going through
everybody
court and
involved.
They're saying he's looking high on screen, and you got him looking high on screen. So yeah, it's not looking good.
Oh, Joe.
All right, so let's go for something less contentious. Nate, what do you think would be the next topic? I know we talked back and forth on.
Well, we were talking about Carmelo Anthony.
Oh, yeah, that should be.
All right, so just everybody this. We're going to talk about Carmelo Anthony. Then we're going to get into the fireworks, which is going to be all immigration, because we know that's what everybody's here to see. And then we'll move on. So
I thought that was resolved on Tim Pool.
Did you say that for me? Did you say that for me showing up? I thought for sure.
For everyone wants to. But all right, so for the Carmelo Anthony case, just so everybody understands, there's been a whole bunch of disinformation out there. So I'll just give a quick little spiel. Carmelo Anthony, he is a honor student, captain of the football team, captain of the track team, has 2 jobs, and is one of the top students in his school. He goes to a track meet and stabs another top athlete, honor student, blah, 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 blah. He stabs him and claims it was self-defense. I think we've all know kind of the details of that. The police report came out, and in the police report, 2 witnesses are noted in the police report. Again, these are hearsay accounts because the police report are telling you what people said to them. But in those 2 accounts, one witness says that Carmelo Anthony warned the victim twice not to touch him, and the victim did touch him twice, and then he responded with deadly physical force. And another person said essentially he was warned twice, and then after the second warning, he touched him again, and then there was a stabbing. So in the accounts, the initial assault happened between Austin, which was the person who was deceased. He had assaulted, pushing, shoving, that type of thing. Carmelo Anthony, once for sure, twice. It all depends on which witness you look at. And then you had the stabbing. So everyone now is complaining about whether this is self-defense or whether this is murder. Now, the second thing a lot of people are also complaining about is that Carmelo Anthony got his bail reduced. But in Texas, that happens quite frequently. And when you're thinking about bail is not a punishment. It's supposed to be so you can come back to court. And in this case, you had an honor student who has all these jobs, who is a pillar of his community, who has no priors, who's literally the captain of football and track team at a track meet, on a Saturday. All those things go into whether or not you're going to get bail. And in this case, it obviously went for him. Now, I like to also mention George Zimmerman got bail, Kyle Rittenhouse got bail, all these other people with self-defense, Daniel Penny got bail, and all that other stuff. So bail, I think, is appropriate in this case. Now, those are just the facts that we can discuss.
Well, and also on the bail issue, I mean, it's not, I guess you assume he's not a flight risk, and and you kind of figure that. I agree with your assessment that it does seem to make sense that if the bail is set to an appropriate level, that they would feel a sense of loss by him skipping bail. In that case, I think everyone would agree that it makes sense, right? So.
Oh, there are a lot of people out there who don't agree that makes sense.
Well, and
those are people that don't understand the bail system and how many people get screwed over by the current bail system and high bail that they can't ever meet.
Right. There also is a lot of controversy over money that was raised on a Gifts and Go, I believe, and how the money is being spent. And there may be a misrepresentation of his, purchasing an expensive house, but from what I understand, Nate had, have me look it up or whatever, he is renting a place for about $3,000 or $3,500 a month, which is expensive, but in a gated community. And when I see that the Metcalfs just got swatted this morning and there's a lot of heat, perhaps he should be in a gated community just to prevent any violence going any direction. I don't know. But I did want to clarify that apparently they did not actually buy a house with a lot of people's money. They're paying rent to stay somewhere. And I do think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Who cares if he did buy a house? Who cares if he did buy a house? Unless it's like a fraud or misrepresentation.
Well, if you say you're raising money for legal expenses and you go buy a house, that's
that
kind
is,
of not
suspect.
cool.
You gotta.
Hey, what if they were in the market anyway? What if in the market anyway? I feel these are separate issues.
Come on. Are you really saying if we are
hang on, my phone's ringing. Just give me a second to do that. I swear.
He's like, we're giving money to a legal defense, and you buy it for a house, and that's not fraud. Like, really? Is that what it's If that's the case, I'm for the gifts and go up today.
No, I agree with that. That was a big concern for, and I always refer back to the Crumleys, but James and Jennifer Crumley, the prosecution said that they were on the run, but they had people and media camped outside their home, and they were looking for a place to stay that nobody knew where they were. And now all of a sudden the state was saying, well, they were on the run, they were fleeing.
If you're on the run and they knew where to find you, how am I on the run? I mean, that it's like, did you serve them? Do you see them? Do you know where they are? How's that on the run?
But you can make that argument for OJ too, right?
Well, very slow run. Very slow run.
No, and it's just it's all a matter of if they want to use, if the state wants to use a fact against you, they can turn a good fact into a bad thing.
Yep.
So, but no, I think him getting bail.
They did. So to give the other side of the story, so the family claims first and foremost that they haven't collected the money yet, and they use their own funds for that, not the monies that they received. And to be fair, the Give, Send, Go they have currently clarifies that the monies will not be exclusively for his legal defense, but for other necessities that they deem to be appropriate. Basically, give us money, and don't hold us liable when we don't end up using large portions of it for his legal defense. And at least now, anyone who's giving now is not being defrauded, because now you're aware as to that particular factor. I will tell you that I found his mother's crying statement, his mother's written crying statement, and the fact that it was pre-written and still crying the way she was. To me, I thought it was a terrible job of acting. I think that, and all his claims about all these threats that her children are getting. First and foremost, anyone who's
I know you're not talking, Joe. I know you're not talking. You were like all talking up fucking Russell Brand the other day and how wonderful he was, and he's looked so sincere. And
I haven't even I don't know what the hell you're talking about, because I haven't mentioned Russell Brand on my show. I haven't mentioned Russell Brand on my show. On this show,
on the Laid Back Law Show, you guys watched fucking Russell Brand like, guys, I didn't do anything. I've made some mistakes. You're like, oh my god.
No, when I said
but the mother cried over her child. I don't believe her. She's finishing it.
You're now. I promise fireworks. And the reason you're making a joke out of yourself is because what I complimented him on, I forgot that I actually had to watch that clip here on this show. That's correct. And what I commented him about was the fact that it was a short, succinct statement. He was saying, "Look, I never did it, and I think everything is going to, when things come out, everyone will realize that I didn't do it. And those of you who know me realize it's outside my character." He wasn't sitting there reading for a written statement, but with weird moments of crying.
He's a professional actor.
Let me pause and bring out a moment. Yeah, okay. You want to say special actor, so you didn't believe him? That's fine. Maybe it's because Carmelo's mother is not a professional actor that no one who actually has a brain believed her. I'm just saying. Maybe that's why. So you want to say
I'm fucking with you. I'm fucking with Joe. I'm fucking with you, Joe. I'm fucking with you.
Joe just wants to believe that Russell Brand doesn't write any statements, just says it all off. He's just automatically
off the cuff.
And just because you read a statement and you're emotionally read a statement, that means Joe's just But again, Joe,
if you watch it, I'm waiting for the first body language experts to come out and watch her and point out how ridiculous.
Because body language is 100%.
It's like she went to the Amber Heard School of Acting. That was
you're not gonna. You guys are still shitting on Amber Heard years later.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah. Just find the shit on. She shits on bad.
She became the paradigm for bad acting from her performance on the stage.
Amber Heard practically made YouTube law. Right? You should be thanking her every single day.
No, we were pretty okay before Amber Heard. But don't get me wrong. She was great for us.
Kyle Rittenhouse.
Kyle Rittenhouse before that.
Is when this genre was really born.
So can I ask you guys? I think stabbing this kid in response, I'm not inclined to think that that's like a good escalation. I think that that's, I don't like this, and I think that, is that surprising you guys? You guys look shocked.
No,
okay.
That's a reasonable.
I think the facts need to come in.
I agree that stabbing is probably not a good escalation based on what we know right now. But at the end of the day, he is innocent right now until proven.
Yeah, true.
Let's see what the evidence produces. Presumably, we're going to have a preliminary exam. I think that's how it's going to work in Texas. It's not going to be a grand jury or anything. So we'll see what the evidence starts coming out with.
Was it illegal? Was it a legal knife?
Oh, nobody knows.
It's debated.
Well, it was illegal.
Did he cross state lines?
Pisco, question.
Yeah.
If I can't if I'm a felon and I can't have a gun and somebody attacks me and I shoot him in self-defense, it's still self-defense, even if I illegally had that gun, correct? You'll just prosecute me for the gun later, but whether it's legal or not, in terms of self-defense, wouldn't that be irrelevant?
Yeah. So I think in the general, the main rule would be that it would be irrelevant. I think you could probably construct some kind of state statute, but certainly my preferred rule would be it's a separate issue, the illegal possession. I thought it was always stupid when people would raise those kinds of issues with Kyle Rittenhouse. I didn't really think that those made sense. I thought the main issue in the Rittenhouse case was, did he provoke? And the evidence there was a little thin that he provoked. But yeah.
It's funny.
It was a lot of thin.
One thing though, so there are some conservative commentators who were talking. There's another case in New York where all these conservative commentators were pro self-defense. So it's a black guy. He was on the train. Homeless guy, has no shirt
Daniel
on.
Penny, are you talking about?
Not Daniel Penny. It's Jordan Williams. He was.
He
was also prosecuted.
The black defendant who wasn't charged.
The black defendant. No, he was charged, and then they dismissed the charges because they said it was valid self-defense. Now, in that case, the homeless guy is on the train. He has no shirt on. You can tell he's not armed. He goes and he slaps and punches this guy. They're in like a little wrestling match. He then escalates, pulls out a knife, stabs the guy, kills the guy. And all the conservative commentators was like, wait, in that situation, self-defense. But then when you flip it, you say, in this case, they're saying not self-defense because it's not proportional. But then in one situation, the person, he used deadly physical force to respond to non-deadly physical force, and we're all screaming self-defense. And in this other case, you have this kid who used, again, and the same escalation, and it's very similar circumstances, except I would say being in a school versus on the subway is a little bit more contextual. But
I think
it's funny because a lot of those people who I've asked this question to have struggled to really define the difference on why they.
You're right, Nate. They're all racist.
No. I want to be clear. Both the defendants are black, so it's not about a race issue. It's just about the way
so Nate, but they're on the bleachers, right? They're on the bleachers. They're out in the open at a game.
No, they're in a tent.
They're in a tent because a rainstorm just came, and they all ran under the tent to get out the rain.
Oh, that adds something too. So it's like a musical chair situation.
Yes, where everybody just ran under the tent, and then that's
probably not enough chairs for everybody. I could see this escalating.
Well, the question is really whether at the moment that he pulled the knife out and stabbed him, was he in objectively and subjectively in immediate fear of great bodily harm or death? You
I
know,
don't think so.
That's the fundamental question.
I don't think so.
I think
Well,
unless
for
there's
a
evidence
for a
of
perfect
something
self-defense
else.
claim, it would be, and then we get into whether or not there's imperfect self-defense options as well.
Sure.
Which there are in Texas, but it's after the conviction now.
The reason
Yeah.
a lot of people were fixating on the Jordan situation is because of its timing and in comparison of the way the charges were handled with the white defendant versus a
with
black
Daniel
defendant.
Penny, which
That's-
I do think was proportionate in terms of he was holding them and
That's
not.
garbage.
Ah,
I hate
there we
that
go.
case. Yeah, no, that's stupid. I think of people who defend. I know that he got off, but just
He
for
didn't
him
get off.
holding him for that.
Found not guilty.
Well, he did get off. He was found not guilty, right?
Right, found not guilty. Well,
That's not
getting
getting
off means when you use the term "get off," in my opinion, that's saying, yeah, he really did something that was evil and he got off.
Or you're
That-
watching a
no, like Bill Cosby.
Well,
I would
do
say
think
Bill
that he did
Cosby
something
got
evil.
off. No,
I
as
have
an
a
example,
completely
Bill
different
Cosby
understanding
got
of what get
off
off means.
because they fucked up in his
technicalities.
sentencing on a technicality. He got off, in my opinion. I'm just telling you. Where
Okay,
beat-
so,
and he beat the rap.
He beat the chart. He beat the rap. Yeah, there we go.
He beat the rap. Yeah. So, I mean,
I know, but
where
I
you
think
at?
I think
Are
it's
you back in the
unreasonable.
damn cave, Joe? Where the hell are
me?
you
Oh,
at?
yeah, I'm in Virginia Beach.
Oh,
So,
What?
okay. Oh, you're near Eric.
You're right near me, Joe.
well, yeah, that's true. I am right. Where are you? I don't know where you're at.
I'm in
Virginia
Hampton,
Beach.
Virginia. I'm about 35 minutes down the road.
Sweet.
You guys get lunch together.
Yeah, there it is.
That's
Camp
totally
today,
gonna
but
happen.
maybe Sunday if he's in town. I don't know.
Sunday is still Passover.
Oh,
So yeah, I'm not gonna.
when do you leave?
Monday.
Ah, shit.
So I don't know. Maybe Sunday night.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
That's
we'll have to-
possible.
Depends on when his wife feels like driving.
It'd be good to meet you. I mean, Joe and I have been circling each other for like 4 years. So I mean,
All right, so I want to. So we're gonna. So the next topic is something that I'm assuming it's going to be short, and then we'll go right into because we have some time. So the next topic, and I know it's going to blow up. Leticia James,
Leticia James.
mortgage fraud.
Mortgage
Now-
fraud.
Now,
sucks to be her.
yes.
This is the careful who you point your finger at, right?
So now, Leticia James, homestead exemption, Virginia, to get less taxes on the house that she bought with her whoever. She says that's her primary residence, so she can get the exemption, but she's the New York State AG, so obviously that's an issue. Then the second one is 1983 when she bought the house and signed the mortgage documents. Those documents, she listed her father as her husband, but the statute of limitations ran out on that. It was 1983, but that actually happened too. So, obviously the Trump administration is saying that there may be an issue with that. But then also on the conservative side, there's the Tulsi Gabbard issue. Tulsi Gabbard also has the homestead exemption problem. She declared that she was a Texas resident and that she was only lived in Texas, so she can get the homestead exemption and get lower taxes on her Texas residency. She has now come out and said that she took bad advice from local people there, but while living in Texas, she then voted in in Hawaii. And the law essentially says if you live in Texas, if you're supposed to vote where you live, your residency and all that stuff. So the claim is that either she illegally voted in Hawaii or she illegally got the tax thing in Texas because she signed an oath that she was a resident and domiciled in Texas. So although you don't know the law, you can only vote where you domicile, where you live, like your homestead. So the issue now is, so Tulsi Gabbard says she took bad legal advice from Texas, and that's what got her caught up, and Leticia James. So what do you guys think about these two cases? And do you think anything should happen from Tulsi Gabbard's case or from Leticia James' case?
If they're
Well,
guilty,
the
prosecute
Leticia
them.
James case, I think, is interesting because when you point your finger at somebody and you say mortgage fraud, and then that person gets in power and says, you might have committed mortgage fraud, I think you might have asked for it a little bit.
Wait, would you be okay with that rationale? So regardless of whether or not she quote asked for it, if it's true that this was motivated because that he was a subject of the civil complaint in action, that would be corrupt, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think it's corrupt. It's not corrupt to hold people responsible for the criminal actions that they do, regardless of why you're doing it.
Wait, no, that can't be true, right? If you're going after Donald Trump for political reasons, you would agree that's corrupt, right?
No, if there was,
it wouldn't be corrupt to do political
law.
prosecution. Okay, so then you agree that it wasn't corrupt to go after Donald Trump for criminal acts?
It's not corrupt to go after Donald Trump, although after following that case, I don't believe he was guilty of it.
No, that case was
That's
utterly
different.
corrupt. That case was
So-
that case,
yeah,
that
so-
case
so-
was 100% corrupt.
If you think it's corrupt,
First of
to
all,
go after someone politically.
Pisco, stop for a second.
But it's not corrupt to allege.
Let's pause for a second and just clarify that when you're talking about going after Trump, compare the two things that happened in New York, one being criminal, one being civil. So you're talking about whether the civil act, you're asking about whether the civil one specifically brought by Leticia James was corrupt. And I'll tell you that 100% when someone runs a campaign saying, I'm going to get that guy, and then finds a way to manufacture claims against them, and you have a judge. When you have a judge who basically says, yeah, I see this disclaimer that he signed on these forms saying do your own due diligence, but I'm not going to, but that doesn't protect him for information that is in his exclusive domain. So that only would protect him from information that the banks have access to. But that doesn't protect him.
Trump ran on getting them.
I want to break this down.
Trump did not run on that. That's not.
Oh,
not
he
true.
sure did. Don't even try to.
No, he didn't. No, he did not. No,
he didn't run on
Pisco. Joe's always going to say Trump is a baby. He's a god. He does everything right. No matter what facts you bring, Joe's going to change the meaning of words. And he's just going to make sure you're going to say
that's crap. No, that is hot garbage. She explicitly ran on the fact that she didn't know what crime she was going to get him for, but that she was going to get him for something. And then she brings up he's the first person, and the first department of the appellate division was asking questions of the AG's office as like, has anyone ever been charged with this before when there was no victim to the crime? Has anyone ever been charged with that? Have we ever seen a judgment of this kind of size before? And even before you get to any of that, what you need to point at and look at is this very critical element, which is Judge Engoron did not dismiss the case because he said the disclaimer doesn't protect him because there's certain information that only he has access to. If that logic makes sense, and I actually do think that philosophically there is some logic to saying that you can't disclaim for information that's in your exclusive control, and you're saying this is what it says in this information that you cannot access, and then say do your own due diligence. How can you tell them to go do their own due diligence? So I can understand how there's logic to that. However, in applying that and during the actual course of the trial, what was the information he ended up being found liable for? Well, you misled about how many floors were in a building that 1 million people are using every single day. That's information that's evidence that never should have been presented at trial because that's evidence that everyone has access to. Everyone knows.
You're getting into
particulars. I'm not getting into particulars.
I'm
getting into one piece of evidence. No.
Joe.
I gave the first example. There are literally 10 examples of evidence that never should have been admitted at trial, which later became the foundation of the judgment against him. The foundation of the judgment is on information that should never have been admitted in the trial based on Judge Engoron's own decision that he said that he can be found liable for information that he alone has access to. So when they go through how many units are on a golf course in Scotland, when they go into the value of properties in Mar-a-Lago, and they start trying to say that because of the fact that he has that he has it listed as being commercial or as being used as some sort of spa or a club, that somehow devalues it when they start relying on information that no human relies on as to like, well, you know what the actual property is based on what the property taxes are, which no person in real estate or anything like that ever would use that to actually figure out what the valuation of property is. And you start pretending.
Joe,
hold on. Isn't that under appeal? Right? Hold on. Stop, everybody. That is under appeal right now, right? The Trump case is under appeal right now.
And it will
Let's wait till it's decided and argue it out. Can we get back to Leticia?
Leticia is that's why I call it Leticia's irony, because if she had been charged over here with some sort of election campaign finance issue, in that case, I would say, okay, I think a lot of politicians probably have slipped up in that area a lot of ways. But the one area of this bizarre, tiny, crazy type of thing of putting down false information when you're trying to get a loan, that same area that she went after him for and said no man is above the law, and that she fell on that, not just in Virginia, she has multiple issues where going back through time, she lied in the application claiming that her father was her husband when she was trying to get a loan. She lied about how many units were in certain apartments, whether it was 4 or 5, depending on how it benefited her. one situation after another, this woman has continually lied to specifically try and get benefits with respect to mortgages she's applying for. And this very hypocritical, crazy woman is the one who went after Trump saying, how dare you go after this? I'm going to hit you with a judgment of $450 million. I think this is the most perfect irony in the world.
So if Trump goes after her politically, is that okay? Is it okay to go after her politically?
It's not politically. Is it genuine justice?
Is it a crime
in holding
or not,
her?
Pisco?
She's being held ultimately to her own statements and her own words, which is no one's above the law.
Did she break the law or no? Yes or no? Did she break the law?
So I don't know. I totally support if she broke a law, she should face the consequences for it. I'm not. But I just want to be clear. If the purpose of going after her was retribution, which Trump ran on, Trump did run on retribution against people who wronged him.
Where's the clip?
Dude, you're gonna deny it? Are you really gonna deny it?
100%.
He did say lock her up.
He did say lock her up. But again, this is Joe. Joe just forgets. He forgets that the 10,000, that the 30,000 foot apartment that he said is really 10,000. He forgot about the lock us up. And he just literally just said.
Remember lock up
He never said he was going after anybody political. But then now it's lock her up. Oh my God!
This is hot. This is
where'd Pisco go? He left.
You're flat out lying. You're flat out lying because I'm telling you now.
Joe. We want to get other people to speak because you've already said like a 10-minute rant.
Civil's
been trying to say.
What is happening?
Misinformation. Give us the clip where he said,
Dave, I want to hear from Dave and
Lock her
Kurt
up.
right now.
That was retribution for Letitia? That was that?
It's retribution. Lock her up.
Lock her up was a joke he said in the middle of the debate.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Lock her up was
Letitia James was a joke too. She was joking too. Go ahead, Kurt.
What the hell are you talking about?
Because
He said that about Hillary Clinton.
Joe, stop. Joe, stop, please.
Lock
It doesn't
her
matter.
up.
And I'm going to end this really quickly on that, okay? Let's say it is political. Who cares? If it's a crime, yes or no, period. Okay?
Oh, no.
Okay,
This is what I want to say about this.
Two things can be true at once. If a crime occurred, it's criminal. Don't give me that bullshit and say that, oh, just because you want to go after them politically. If they did commit a crime, there's a crime. If they didn't,
so you're fine with all the investigations into Trump. You're fine with all the investigations into Trump.
If they're false, when they're false, I'm against it. If they're true, then it is. So, the records case I think was bullshit. Biden could have been prosecuted just as easily as Trump.
Dude, get the fuck out of here. You guys are out of your mind. That was the most obvious case in the world. He was completely guilty. And he got off because he won the fucking election. Oh, sorry, for swearing.
But you really want to say Joe Biden didn't get off because the prosecutor said, well, he was just
so too addled.
The sitting president was just so dumb that he didn't know. Come on. Come on.
No, because I read the her report, and I know that that's a misrepresentation of the. Okay, but we don't get into it if you don't want to.
All right. So
it is.
I want to hear from Dave about Letitia.
What I was just going to say is that if a prosecutor has a good faith belief that a crime was committed and it's done without malice, then it's not a corrupt prosecution. The question between the two is whether or not there was a good faith belief that Trump committed a crime, and was it brought with malice, and is there a good faith belief that Letitia committed a crime, and is it brought without malice? Those are the two issues that we need to assess. And if there's a good faith belief, objectively looking at it, that a crime was committed, then the charge is not, or bringing a charge then is not corrupt. I believe that it was corrupt with regard to Trump because I don't believe there was a good faith basis for the charge, although he was found liable.
For which one? For you're talking about the mortgage situation, the Mar-a-Lago case?
Yeah.
No, but even beyond that, right? So even beyond that, Trump promised retribution against his political enemies, and he promised to wield the Justice Department in political ways. He's doing so. He's ordering investigations now into Chris Krebs because he said the election wasn't stolen. I mean, he's obviously abusing his office by wielding the Department of Justice in political ways. And so,
but even with that, as long as there's a good faith, objective belief, specific articulatable facts that a crime has been committed, I think they're shielded.
Well, no, but if Joe Biden, if there were evidence that Joe Biden whispered in Merrick Garland's ear and said, "You need to prosecute Trump," you guys would be losing your minds.
Well, again, I don't think that
would be impeachable.
I don't think that there was an objective standard met that with regard to a crime or anything else fraudulent happening in that particular case.
With the documents case, I mean, the documents case, he's like on tape saying that he knows that he's not supposed to show these to people. He's on, moving the boxes around.
I wasn't talking about the documents case. I was talking about the mortgage case, because that's more apples to apples.
The which one? The Mar-a-Lago one you said?
The overvaluation case, right? The Ngoran case.
Yeah, I think that was, well, again, the 30,000 foot versus 10,000 feet. There's a lot. I think you would even have to admit there's a lot of issues with Trump, but I do agree that if it was anyone else, they would not have been prosecuted.
It was unique.
Trump was prosecuted because he was Trump. I think that's an everyday thing, but it is what it is.
It's false when there's a disclaimer saying do your due diligence, and the 30,000 and how many square feet are in a building is something you takes 5 minutes online if you know how to search.
Yeah. He said
it should have been dismissed because of that.
Yeah, but so Trump put on the form, it's 30,000 square feet. It was only 10,000 square feet. And instead of you saying that that's corrupt, you're giving an excuse. You're trying to give an excuse for it.
No,
it was wrong. It was fraudulent.
You're wrong.
And the court found it was wrong.
No,
all I was saying is that
fraud.
Why are we still talking about Trump and not the Leticia case, guys? Which is the current case?
33,000 feet to 10,000 feet. That was
sort of
false.
activity.
No, it's not false when he says do your own due diligence.
Again,
and don't rely on this.
Can we
And
talk about
That
Leticia?
is ridiculous, Joe. That is
Can we talk about
If
Leticia?
he
Can we
had
talk
written
about the case?
10
all right, let's get to Leticia.
Yeah, please. I mean, we keep cycling back to Trump, which is another case. That's fine, but it's not appeal.
Because this has so much to do with those other cases. I think that's why everybody's bringing them in. So let's just move forward to the next thing.
I do want to bring up the super chat though, because I thought I did not know this, that Carmelo. I don't know if this is true, but the claim is Carmelo is currently suspended from the track team and not allowed to be there at all. He had recently been suspended from school for carrying a knife.
Well,
that's,
I would like to.
That's troubling if true. I don't know.
If true, yes. But right now, I haven't seen anything except for this thing that says
That's
that.
why
So hopefully,
I've never heard confirmation of that.
I never heard any confirmation.
That's the first I heard of it. So
but there's actually video and all that stuff, and all the stuff that we're talking about is just, I just rather just use the police reports because that's the best facts we have as of right now. But if there's other facts that come out from official sources, then yeah.
All right, let's hear from Sean. He has court at 1:00. So Sean, get it in while you can.
I mean, I don't know what it is. Like, yes, there's a letter saying, "Oh, we think she committed mortgage fraud." Like, okay, well, let's actually see it because, and I will say, yes, Trump did run with the intent of we're going to start paying back these MFers. Like that was part of the option here is, we're going to settle family business. Like there were people who clearly voted for that. Like that's not questioned here. Like he definitely ran as part of one of his planks. I'm going to settle some scores. And yeah, Tish is going to be one of them, it looks like.
And isn't that condemnable? Wait, don't you condemn that, Sean? That's horrible.
I mean, well, yeah, like if they've done this and they dug through every scrap and slip to go get it, yeah, I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong, but is it a legal prosecution? Yes.
He specifically
said that doesn't mean it's like it, but that's part of the thing is if you're going to start, jerking people around, you better make sure you're pretty clean because these, once he became president,
I hear you on that. Yeah.
Resource for that. Yeah.
I
don't like it, but also it doesn't help that Leticia James is not the most sympathetic defendant in the world here.
He specifically
if this is actually true.
He specifically said that his revenge will be success. That's what he said. He said that multiple times.
I mean, if that was the case,
all of you who are talking about his retribution, he said his revenge will be success. That's what he
said. I assumed
times.
he was going to start collecting scalps. So
I didn't assume that at all.
I did.
You're so
ironically.
Bullshit,
Joe. No. There are a ton of people right now that are so angry with Pam Bondi and Trump for not going after people. I mean, you can look at Flynn. You can look at everybody else who are saying, "What's going on, Cash? Hold on. What's going on, Cash Patel? Why aren't there arrests? Why aren't people being perp? Why are they? Because he actually hasn't been going.
Well, who? He certainly has. They certainly have. They're in the White House, and this is remarkable, right?
Well,
he's in the White House.
Doesn't mean you're going after something.
I understand, but first of all, Pam Bondi's acting like she's a Fox News host every day.
Yeah, I know.
They're just like
that's part of the
and that's disgraceful, by the way. I mean, and they're just having these meetings with Donald Trump, and in one of the meetings, Donald Trump signed an executive action saying criminally investigate Chris Krebs. That is remarkable that we have, wide open, the president directing the criminal investigation into someone who.
Why is that a problem?
It's a problem for the president to interfere in the Justice Department's against the prosecutorial decisions. There's a strong norm against it. You know it, and because of the fear.
Have you read the Constitution? It's his Justice Department.
It's the United States Justice Department. It's the United States Justice Department. It's held in trust.
And he is the chief of the executive branch for the United States.
So if Joe Biden ordered the criminal investigation into Trump, you would be fine with that.
What I would say to you is that
would you be fine with that?
Hold on. Let him finish his point.
You're trying to deflect
don't cut him off.
Question. You're trying to go to a whole different thing. Like, what about this? What about this? We're not doing that today. Today, we're just going to actually stay on point. So the point that I'm making here is it's his Justice Department. It's he's the chief of the executive branch. They're not the judiciary. They are the prosecutorial wing of the executive branch. And this notion that Adam Schiff was throwing out at Pam Bondi during confirmation of like, we're worried you're going to be Trump's man. I'm worried she wouldn't, or woman. I'm worried she wouldn't be, because she should be. It was Biden's DOJ. It was Trump's DOJ before that. It is their DOJ. They're the chief of the executive branch and the prosecutorial wing of it.
So you have no problem with Leticia James going after Donald Trump, because it's her office, so she can do whatever she wants.
No. The question then becomes, okay, how are you directing it? In other words, how is Trump acting in directing that DOJ? But this pretend notion that we have that the DOJ is somehow some wing off in the hills there that has no relationship to the executive branch is a joke, and it's. I'm not saying no one's saying there's no
one's saying that there's no relationship. Obviously, the chief executive is the president. The president has control over the Justice Department, of course. But the reason that there's been a strong norm.
There's a difference. I think it's talking about. I think people are upset about the Berea rule. Okay, or Barry. Essentially, the show me the man, I'll show you a crime. So it's like I'm going to go find a crime for that person.
Right.
It's very different than you're investigating, in general, and somebody reports something and you investigate. There is a difference.
Yeah, but the Justice Department, right? We don't like it, and it's been the norm that the president doesn't interfere in the independent, prosecutorial decisions of the Justice Department and the FBI, precisely because we're afraid that politics will infect, or at least there'll be the appearance of that, and that the entire administration of justice will be tainted by it. And you guys would have a good point, right? Like if Joe Biden was actually directing the prosecution of Donald Trump, even if it were based on something legitimate, the fact is the appearance would be so bad that people couldn't have faith in the administration of justice. And so I think that it's absolutely absurd that Donald Trump is sitting there in the Oval Office calling, officially making executive actions for criminal investigations and referrals of his political enemies, including bureaucrats who said the election wasn't stolen.
This is a brand new take of yours, because you didn't have that with respect to Jack Smith.
But Jack Smith wasn't appointed by Joe Biden. Joe Biden had no role in that process.
He wasn't appointed by Congress. He wasn't appointed by Congress.
He was appointed by the Attorney General.
And who's the Attorney General? Part of the executive branch.
Merrick Garland. No, I understand that. But the president himself is not wielding influence on those cases.
100% he was. In fact, Jack Smith.
How?
How? Because he was hired by Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland works for Trump.
Merrick Garland didn't say, "Daddy Joe, is this guy okay?" That's
what.
Yeah,
Joe let Merrick Garland do what he was going to do.
Yeah, there's nothing I've heard where Merrick Garland asked Biden, "Hey, can I hire this guy as special counsel?"
There was all these meetings with respect to the prosecutions against Trump in the White House, meetings with Kamala Harris. You're telling me that the White House had no influence whatsoever on these prosecutions against Trump?
Hang on a second.
How naive does that sound?
So you mentioned Jack Smith.
I'm talking about all these problems. No, I'm talking about
Fannie Willis.
No, we're talking about going after the man. We're talking about going after the man. You tell me, why is Fannie Willis meeting with Jack Smith? Why is she meeting with Jack Smith and Kamala Harris? Are you telling me that those just happen to be? It just happens.
Hang on. So I don't know anything about the Kamala Harris meeting. But if she's meeting with Jack Smith, wouldn't it be appropriate for investigators, like a state investigator and a federal investigator?
Her boyfriend logged billing hours for going to the White House.
With the White House, but that's not necessarily meeting with Jack Smith. When was Jack Smith in the White House?
Oh my God, Jack Smith was having them turn over documents. They're working hand in glove with each other. You're sitting here pretending that they were sitting here working as independent agencies.
There's no evidence that Joe Biden. There's no evidence that Joe Biden interfered in those prosecutions at all.
There's no evidence that Joe Biden knows what TV show he watched last night. It's not Joe Biden.
So then you agree. So then you agree. So then you agree that Joe Biden didn't interfere.
No, what I'm saying is his White House did. I don't think he did anything. I think it's his staff that was doing everything around him.
Which member of his staff interfered with the prosecution?
Well, I don't know. You tell me. We have no idea who's running the country for the last 4 years.
You have no evidence. You have no evidence of it. And if it did happen, you guys would be screaming from the hills.
Evidence. The evidence I have is the block billing hours from Nate and Nathaniel Wade.
That's a Georgia prosecutor. That's a Georgia prosecutor
who met also with Jack Smith. And I also have the fact that Jack Smith is working for the Biden administration because he's hired by Merrick Garland instead of being appointed by Congress.
That's not enough to show. That's not enough to show that Joe Biden is interfering on his staff.
But you're sitting here saying that everything here is so above board when one of the cases was even dismissed because it wasn't above board, because he wasn't a properly appointed special prosecutor. The Florida case was dismissed.
Oh my God, that was a ridiculous opinion.
Because it was an unconstitutional prosecution.
Are we still back on Trump from Leticia?
We're talking Eric, the reason it's relevant is because we're talking about what's a proper way of assessing the legitimacy of prosecution against a political figure. You can't talk about Leticia James individually without assessing, okay, what is a healthy yardstick for prosecution that can easily.
Well, I like the apples to apples with Tulsi. Actually, I thought that was a very interesting take, especially both are current and so similar in regards of declaring.
The Tulsi Gabbard case is simple. She moved to Texas. She declared in her homestead exemption, this is her legal, lawful residence, because to get the homestead exemption, it has to be the place where you live, like where you domicile. For the majority, that's the place where you want to return to. So, and generally, if you get the homestead exemption in that place, that's the place you have to vote, because to vote, the same requirements that you need to get the homestead exemption are the same requirements that you need to vote. So she said that happened, and she signed a document in Texas under oath saying that was her homestead. Her reasoning for signing that document was that local officials told her that was the way that she gets that she could protect her family, because if she didn't do it, her address would be out there in the public domain. So she wanted to keep that out. So she said that was the reason why they actually did it. Now, she actually voted in Hawaii. Now, in Hawaii, in the Hawaiian law, it says you're presumed to be a resident or to have to vote where you actually have your homestead exemption. But now Tulsi Gabbard has come out and said she is living in Hawaii. She's a resident of Hawaii, and that she's not a resident, and she voted legally. Now, if that's the case, then you challenge the tax exemption that she got, saying that she was there, versus, and if that's not the case, then you challenge the voting. So that's what Tulsi Gabbard's going on. It's an either or. Either she voted illegally, or either she got the tax exemption
illegally. She screwed up.
Or maybe there may be
one way or another, she screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, she either committed tax fraud or she committed election fraud.
Yes.
Bad news.
But either way is both bad.
But I do want to be fair to Tulsi. Number one, I think the Tish James situation is a lot worse and more intentional than Tulsi. And the reason why I'll say that is because Tulsi had just moved to Texas during the presidential election.
Right.
So just like when I moved. So it's kind of like, yeah, I'm still registered to vote in New York, but I'm not voting in New York, nor have I begun to vote in Texas. So it's like during that 6-month time frame or 3-month time frame, you're changing and you're trying to change. So that you could get mixed up in that way. So I can say that is more of a unintentional mistake, based on.
And she didn't vote in both states.
Yeah, she did, and she only voted in one place. Where I think you have to make the argument. Everything that we're talking about with Tish James, it's pretty intentional, right? My father's not my husband.
Allegedly,
right?
allegedly.
Well, I can pull up the document.
Well, if she's renting out the houses,
she signed.
By the way, if she claimed her domicile is in Virginia and she's renting it out to someone else, that really
doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound good. No, listen.
Another distinction is I don't think Tulsi's an attorney. And so for her to make a legal mistake like this is not surprising. Tish James is a freaking attorney general. I mean, for crying out loud. She's supposed to know the law, and she's sitting here breaking it over and over again in the same areas that she was saying no person is above the law.
Listen, no person is above the law. I'm concerned that this is politically motivated, but if she actually did a crime, I'm totally fine with her being prosecuted.
You know, but before we run out of freaking time, let's get to the Garcia case.
Yeah,
because I know that's going to be the fight here, and I'm going to shut up. I'll just lay out the facts so we can all know what's happening. Now, these are just going to be the stone cold facts. Garcia came to the United States. He came here illegally. Make it very clear. He was here illegally.
2011.
However, he entered the U.S. in 2011, claimed that he was fleeing gang violence from El Salvador, settled in Maryland, and he married a U.S. citizen. They had 3 children, and that's where they live. Now,
they had one child. There was 2 children from the previous marriage, but there was 3, and they all have special needs.
Okay, all right, perfect. In 2019, he got an immigration judge granted him a protection from deportation to El Salvador against the Convention Against Torture, because again, it's just like back in the 1930s when Jews fled Nazi Germany to the United States. You can come to the United States. Now, the only place you couldn't deport them back to was Nazi Germany, but you could send them to other places. You want to send them to Canada, for instance, or other places. But you couldn't send them back to Germany because they would be killed in Germany. So he kind of had like the same situation. You could send them somewhere else, but you couldn't send them back to essentially El Salvador. So he had an order specifically saying that you couldn't send him back there, giving him like this temporary status. He was arrested on March 12, 2025. He was detained by ICE, pulled over, and this is where it gets funny. It seems like he was put on the wrong bus or something, where the Trump administration has admitted that this was an administrative error. He had a court order saying don't send him to El Salvador, but the Trump team sent him to El Salvador. Now, he's in El Salvador. He's an El Salvadorian citizen. The Supreme Court has said, because Trump team violated this court order, you need to bring him back to the United States. Facilitate. Well, the first judge said you had to bring him back. The second judge had to facilitate. Now, the issue is that what right does the United States have to order another country to turn over their citizen back to the United States? Now, I'd like to also put it in this perspective. Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden is in Russia. If Russia mistakenly deported him back to the United States and then said, hey, we want Edward Snowden back, that was a mistake. Do you think we would give back Edward Snowden to the Russians? I think not. So that's the issue here, where it's clear this guy's rights were violated, his due process rights were violated. But then on the other end, how can you really get him back without violating the El Salvadorian sovereignty? So I'll leave it to these guys to fill out the facts or whatever. But
starting with Dave.
Is there I guess, is there a treaty between the U.S. and El Salvador with regard to extradition and things like that we'd be dealing with?
But it's a citizen. It's an El Salvador.
It's a contract. There's an agreement. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but the agreement could reference El Salvadorian citizens as well. I don't know to the extent that there is. But the court doesn't have jurisdiction over El Salvador and can't order that.
So the court has jurisdiction over this case. The Supreme Court, in ordering that the district court order be facilitated or be enacted to facilitate the removal and from custody in El Salvador and his release from custody in El Salvador, they have jurisdiction over this case.
Yeah,
but they don't have jurisdiction over El Salvadorian citizen. That would be kidnapping, technically.
Well, no, they absolutely do have jurisdiction
over El Salvador.
No. They can't order the El Salvadoran president directly, but they're not the defendants in this case. The defendants in this case are executive administration officials.
Yeah, but my argument is, what are you going to do about it? Because it's a citizen now in El Salvador, in his country. If we remove that person without the consent of El Salvador, it's called kidnapping.
Could Trump get him back? Could Trump get him back? You guys know Trump can get it back if he wanted to.
No, I don't.
Yes.
No.
Well, I mean, it depends.
Not
what you're asking, but look at the long run. Look at the long run.
Stop.
What you're asking.
We're starting on a terrible
foundation. For the court
foundation
to have the
here.
authority to be able to order the president to go into a foreign nation, extract somebody, and remove them back. That's what you're asking.
You're confused. No. That's not what we're talking about here. So there could be absolute limits to what the district court can do, what it can't do. There are limits to the jurisdiction. I would agree with that. The court, the Supreme Court, said there are Article 2 limits, and I would agree with that as well. And so would the district court. But what we're talking about here, and the first instance that everyone needs to agree to is the reality of the situation, which is if Trump wanted this person back, he would be back. And let's not pretend that he wouldn't be.
Okay. That's not
Well,
relevant.
setting
That's not
that
remotely
aside,
relevant.
you're
Wait,
asking-
do you agree
None
with
of
it
this-
though? Do you
no,
wait?
no,
do you
no,
agree with
it's-
it though?
I agree that the Yankees are the greatest sports
Wait,
franchise.
do
in
you
history.
agree with it?
It's
Yes
also
or no,
not
Joe?
relevant.
This is garbage.
It's
This is
not-
about
No,
authoritarianism.
you're
And
garbage.
you're defending.
raising
You're
a garbage
defending an
point here,
authoritarian
because
right now.
That is not.
The defendant
You
who
love screaming
loses the
authoritarian,
judgment
fascist,
doesn't
and
want to
racist, and all
pay
of
the
those.
judgment, but
We
still
got
has
it. We
to.
got it. Get that
So,
out of your
no,
system.
no.
Say
Can you
authoritarian
please?
and
No, wait.
fascist and
Yes, no.
racist.
It
Give me all
absolutely is.
that.
No.
Give me that. Give me that.
So
But
it
no,
absolutely is.
before we
It
get to
absolutely
any of
is.
this,
So what
before we
you're
get to any
defending
of this,
right now.
stop
So what you're
talking for a
defending right
second.
now is someone
Stop talking.
breaking the law. The president is breaking the law brazenly in front of your face, and you're defending it.
You're muted.
All right. So respectfully, the way Nate laid out the facts here, he usually does a great job. And I think this time he read from the brief of Garcia as to what the statement of facts are, because there's some critical facts that he omitted from the get-go here. And we're starting with the foundation, which is a very slanted perspective as to the underlying facts here. First fact is that there was due process in 2019. During the course of that proceeding, there was an order, and he sort of implied it, but should be understood. There was an order and a finding that he's a member of MS-13. He's a gang member, and during the course of an order of deportation, there's an order of deportation. You don't know what you're talking about. There was an order of deportation.
I'm not going to let you do this.
No. Don't get into the personal attacks. Okay.
Stop
First off, the chat's starting to drive me up a tree too. I don't want personal attacks, and I do want to address this right here. I saved this out for a while. Okay, I ruined my own show. Tough shit. If you don't like it, then piss off. I don't want this to be an echo chamber. Another thing is, attack an idea, don't tack each other. And I mean that for the chat, and I mean it here. Attack ideas, but don't attack each other personally.
So when Joe says there was a finding that he was MS-13, that's not true. That's not true. It would be no different. No, that's not true, Joe.
For example,
what's not
true is when you say he didn't have due process. Did he or did he not have due process?
He did not have a unanimous court. A unanimous court of the Supreme Court said he did not have due process. You agree with that? Yes or no? The unanimous Supreme Court. A unanimous Supreme Court.
We have an issue
have due process
here that needs to be addressed going forward. And the issue is where the line is with regard to what the court can order the administration to do. And regardless of how we got here, what the people that want Trump to go get him are insisting that the court be able to order the administration to go invade a sovereign nation. That's
not what's going on here. Wait, so they ordered them to facilitate the release from custody in El Salvador. Can that possibly mean do nothing?
No, it means ask for
okay,
it
so
back.
it means do something. Doesn't mean that you can do that doesn't mean the district court can order them to invade. I'm not saying that they can do that, but they can order them to do some stuff, right?
Okay. So let's break it down. You know what? For now, I'll work with you on what you're trying to suggest here. You tell me, what is the district court authorized to direct him that he must do?
That
without
will be figured out,
infringing on his Article 2 powers.
Yeah. So that will absolutely be figured out. So just to be clear for everyone who knows, there's going to be fights over what are the Article 2 limits here. Can they order them to cancel contracts with Bukele? I think they can. Can they order President Trump and the administration to request him back? I think they can. Can they order them to get discovery into what the actions are of the administration to show that they're being good faith in approaching it? I think they can. So there are absolutely steps that they could take here that wouldn't No, they haven't. They have defied this court. Wait, they have defied this court. They have defied.
I'll tell you how he did it.
They have defied. They have defied the court.
He did it. He asked the president of El Salvador in front of an entire press corps, "You want to give him back?"
He did not. That's not true. That is not true.
President Bukele said, "Why would I send them back to your country? I like your country. Why would I send a murderer to your country?"
No, that is not true. We're going to get this real clear. Donald Trump did not ask Bukele to bring him back. You agree with that? Yes?
No, I think he did ask him to bring him back.
No. He did not request.
No. And that's all they can ask him to do.
They didn't request him back. No, name the staff member who requested Alberto Garcia to come back. Name him.
What I'm saying
I would have to go to the video.
No, they didn't. That's not true.
He's sitting there saying, "Why would I send him back to your country? I wouldn't."
No.
I like you.
No. The question is, did they request Kilmar Alberto Garcia to come home? They didn't.
I believe he did.
No, they did not.
What was the context of that question? We could pull up the clip.
No. What they said is, the court can't order us to bring him back. We won 9-0, a ridiculous statement. They said all your questions should be directed to the president of El Salvador. That's what they said.
Yeah. So do you want to send them back or not?
No.
I mean,
they did not request him back.
What? So I'll ask you.
I can play the clip.
So I'm going to ask you.
We're going to pull up the clips. Everybody, stop for a minute. We're going to pull
play
up the
clip. Here is the clip. Are we ready?
Yeah. Share it on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
The man.
Got to put it up on the screen.
I got it.
You got it. It's up.
I'm going to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was
Will you ask?
To El Salvador.
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our.
Everyone's lying.
Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not.
If they want.
The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs. If they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
There you go.
So will you return him?
Wait, pause right there. No, this is outstanding, actually. This is crazy. So he said, look, right there, in anything that you guys just heard, be objective as attorneys. Is any of that, what Pam Bondi said, a request to bring back Abrego Garcia? Be honest.
I heard, will you return him? Now, I don't know who said that.
No. That was the reporter. So the reporter was asking Trump, will you ask President Bukele to return him? And Trump directed it to the Attorney General. And the Attorney General said, first of all, lying about the fucking the findings of the immigration courts.
I believe the president of El Salvador, I forget his name, was lying when he said, how can I return him? That would be illegal. We're not there yet. All I'm asking is, Joe just claimed victory. He's like, there you go. Nothing of what we just heard was a request to bring Abrego Garcia back, correct?
What you saw there was her saying, we're happy to take him back and help facilitate his return.
Well, send a plane.
So what we said is, if El Salvador decides to do it, we'll send a plane. We'll have a plane ready. That's what she said. That's not a request to release him.
You're sitting here.
Wait, is it a request or not? Is it a request or not? Wait, why are you guys like, this is gross. Just answer. It's not a request to bring him back. Come on. Be honest.
I think yes.
Be honest.
It is a request to bring him back.
Oh, it's a request.
Like, hey, you know what? She explained the situation. This is
there
the
is
situation.
no direct. Nobody ever said, "Will you?" Otherwise, in that segment, if we're going to get specific and content, nobody specifically said, "Will you send him back to us?" Those words were never uttered. No, they were not uttered. There's implications, there's thought, there's implied, but technically speaking, no. Nobody said, President, blah, 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 will you bring him back in that part of the clip? I don't know if it came later, but in that part of the trip, it was not stated. Now, can I back up a little bit on the overall? Because I feel like as I'm listening, everybody is arguing a different point in a timeline. Mm-hmm. I feel like, for example, the due process, right? You can't say he had no due process. You could say that he had due process up to a point. Let me finish before you shake your head. Did he not appear in immigration courts and get orders to be removed? Yes, that was still due process. The argument is somewhere on the timeline, there was more due process that maybe he should have had and he didn't have. Is that a fair statement? Nate, you're good at correcting me on that.
No, it is not a fair statement.
On an overall timeline.
It is not a fair statement.
So he never had any due process whatsoever. It's like we plucked him off the street and we said, "Go, you're in El Salvador. Bye bye."
So he had due process with respect to his immigration matter initially, right? So in the initial INA based deportation proceeding, that was due process. What didn't have even the semblance of due process, which is what the Fourth Circuit found and what a unanimous Supreme Court found, was this deportation. This
part of the timeline. So that's why I am saying that we're looking at a long timeline, and people are focusing at different areas of the timeline. It's very difficult in terms of the argument, because was he MS-13? Yes, I think that's been proven.
No.
So Princess George's County records are all lies.
So let's be So Eric,
hold on. But before we get kind of crazy, we're all in the assumption that he is an MS-13 gang member because of Pam Bondi. Now you're saying he's not. So
No, he's
explain,
not- no,
because-
there's no evidence.
Pam Bondi is
explain-
dead.
Absolutely is.
No, no,
It
no,
was
no.
just Georgia
Let
County.
Pisco, because Pisco is trying to correct
Yes.
our mistakenly. So go ahead, explain to us why.
The only evidence that we have that he's an MS-13 member is in 2019, this report made by a cop, which is filled with errors, I have to say. They say he's breaking him up for murder, that's whatever, says that there is a confidential informant, a confidential source that is not identified, says that he's a member of MS-13. Doesn't say how he knows. The confidential informant doesn't say how he knows. Doesn't say, specifically, why he would be in a position to know about it. And says that his oh my, stop, please stop, please stop. And then the fact that he has the Chicago Bulls jersey on at the time of the arrest in 2019. That's it. That is not enough evidence for us to think that someone is a member of MS-13. That is ridiculous. So, and also, by the way, this cop was later suspended for misconduct related to, fucking a prostitute and releasing, confidential information to that prostitute. So, no, this is two levels of hearsay. There are two levels of hearsay here. So, one is the police report itself is hearsay. It's an out-of-court statement offered to prove truth, matter, asserted. And then the hearsay itself relies on hearsay, confidential hearsay, anonymous hearsay that we have no basis of evaluating. There was no opportunity to cross it. Wait, excuse me. No, stop. And I'll get to that.
It all dies with the court finding.
No, it doesn't die with the court finding. So there was no opportunity to cross-examine this anonymous confidential witness. There was no opportunity to cross-examine the cop who wrote it. Wait, excuse me. There was no opportunity to cross-examine the cop who wrote it. You guys would be absolutely outraged. You would be outraged. You would be outraged with any lawyer who would represent that someone is guilty of being a gang member on the basis of that evidence that was never tested. And all that Joe is referencing is a bond hearing. Bond hearing in immigration court, a bond hearing where the threshold is super fucking low. As you guys all know, I'm sure you've had clients that have had to make bond. A finding that because I'm telling the truth. Because I'm telling the truth, and I'm debunking you. I'm debunking you.
Boring when you're yelling the same thing over and over again.
I'm yelling different things.
You're yelling different things. Same thing over and over again. So you're ignoring certain things here. I'll start. And you're ignoring that there was a court finding. You just say that Pam Bondi is a liar, which
she's lying.
Oh, okay. So
there's no finding he's a member of MS-13. There's no finding he's a member of MS-13. You heard that? Yes.
Is there finding he should be deported?
He has. What is that relevant to the question? Yes. Wait. There was an order of removal. He conceded removability.
If they had picked him up, if they had sent him anywhere in the world but El Salvador, if they had sent him anywhere in the world but El Salvador, could they have done that at any time?
So you don't want to talk about MS-13 anymore. You don't want to talk about MS-13 anymore. You don't want to talk about MS-13 anymore. You don't want to talk about MS-13. I was going to say, do you want to move on?
No.
Do you want to move on?
Whether he is an MS-13.
Do you want to move on from that? And do you want to talk about something else?
The reason I want to move on for that is because you're ignoring reality. Because so we're not talking about MS-13 anymore. Pam Bondi just told you you're ignoring reality. Well, so if you have evidence that there was no finding by the court, so in that case, come bring your evidence to that. Pam Bondi, what we have here is the Attorney General saying there was two court findings that he's part of MS-13. You're saying no, liar.
No. That's a lie. That's a lie. What you just said is wrong. Those are not findings that he's a member of MS-13. She lied. She's a liar.
Okay.
She's a fucking
scumbag
liar.
Proof of that. You don't have proof.
I do because I do have proof of that. No, I do have proof of that. I do have proof of that because I can actually read what the immigration court said, and that is not a finding that he's a member of MS-13. And anyone who says that either doesn't know the difference between a bond hearing and a substantive hearing related to, or a decision on the facts and what the court is doing, and which is its hands are tied when there's a report.
A simple reality. You could sit here arguing about that Pam Bondi is just flat out lying and she can't read an order.
She's also wrong.
Nearly as well as you can, and just start screaming about that. And think
all right, everybody, do me a favor and stop swearing because I'd like to keep this.
Okay, sorry,
my monetized video a little bit.
Okay, so or we can move on to the next question as far as just looking at this from a justice.
No, I want to resolve it. Wait, why can't we
resolve it? We can't resolve it because there's an impasse, and I don't have all the facts on hand to parse it through. So we'll just say that we agree to disagree. You're saying he wasn't, Joe, the Attorney General. Everybody's saying this. We'll have to argue that later.
Eric, I respect what you're saying, and I respect what you're saying, and I think that you should obviously listen to information and take it in and all that stuff. But if I'm representing it correctly, right? If only the argument and evidence that we have is members of MS-13 relates to this confidential report that was never cross-examined by a cop who was never cross-examined.
Right now, we don't have
I understand, but if I'm representing this correctly,
if he is or not, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because there's an order you can deport him. Is that not the current standing? You just cannot. The stay is on deporting him to El Salvador. There's an order to deport him. So if they have an order, they can deport him. So I'm going to ask you this.
No. You're wrong.
I'm asking you a simple question. If they had deported him to Colombia, would they have violated the stay? If they deported him to Honduras, how is that?
So a order of removal specifies a country. The order of removal was to El Salvador. They conceded removability to El Salvador, and then they were granted withholding from removal. And so it would not be legal. It would not be legal. It would not be legal.
Stop yelling. Stop yelling. I'm agreeing with you. So that's a fair counterpoint. That's a fair counterpoint. You're saying if the order of removal specifically says El Salvador, you're saying that you can't just remove him to a different country. That's a legitimate counterpoint. If you make a legitimate point, I'm willing to concede it. I'm not.
I appreciate that.
So,
dear diary.
No, so if that's specifically what the order of removal says, that they have to specifically designate which country, and that country has now been stayed, I can defer to that being an argument that his counsel can make. But
Trump, it's beyond that, bro. Because like Trump is trying to find a prison where he's free from the American law, where he's not constrained by American law. And everyone concedes this was done illegally. And so all of these distractions, MS-13, protective order, domestic violence, that kind of thing, it's all distracting from the fact that what Trump is doing here, he's trying to make a fucking black site. I'm sorry.
You're kind of doing a little mind reading here.
But he's saying he wants to deport U.S. citizens. You agree he says that, right?
He said he wishes he could. That's not saying he's going to come.
But that's not going to happen. Obviously.
That's disgraceful. Why can't you guys acknowledge that's disgraceful?
Oh, no, we do, but we try to move to the next point. It's disgraceful. No, it's the next point. You're right.
I wish cancer on various evil political figures. That doesn't mean I'm giving them cancer.
I know, but he has shown, right? This action itself is completely violative of the law. If he were to, it shows that he doesn't care about the law, right? There's a finding right now by Judge Boasberg that there's probable cause for prosecution of contempt.
Judge Boasberg made an illegal order because he's directing him to fly planes in areas that he has. It's crazy to even think that he had jurisdiction about this prisoner who's in Texas and that he's in DC and he thinks he has jurisdiction over this case. And it's crazy he thinks he has jurisdiction over Article 2 powers as to how Trump should handle his own military planes. It's crazy that he thought he had jurisdiction.
Would you say that with U.S. citizens? Wait, so would you say that with U.S. citizens? So if there were a bunch of U.S. citizens on a military plane being sent to
but
the whole point is this holding applies to both citizens and non-citizens. I
would say the exact same thing if there were citizens because you cannot ignore the Constitution for the purposes of upholding the Constitution, and that's what you're saying we should be doing here. That Judge Boasberg should just go out of his lane, and you could. Why Judge Boasberg? Why go to him? You can go to a judge at a local pig fair, and he'll also give an order to Trump.
So the Supreme Court's holding was narrow. The Supreme Court holding was that it had to be brought through a habeas action. That's it. It wasn't about this jurisdictional. It wasn't even subject matter jurisdiction. It was venue. So the courts do have the subject matter jurisdiction. But the courts generally have the subject matter jurisdiction to have ordered them someone who a U.S. official is not in the country to not hand over these people to El Salvador. That is no more nor less than what was ordered.
Judge Boasberg is not in Texas, so he didn't have the authority. That's what the court held.
It was invalid. It was invalid because it wasn't brought in habeas. It wasn't brought in habeas.
Because the DC judge had no authority. Can you say it? Say it out loud. The DC judge has no authority. That's what the Supreme Court held.
No. The DC judge did not have venue. A venue was improper. That's different than saying he didn't have the authority or subject matter jurisdiction. Authority generally, the authority. What you're trying to
the legitimacy of his order. He had no authority.
No. What you're trying to do is you're trying to bring in this concept of subject matter jurisdiction that relates to your particular vision of Article 2 and Article 3 and how they interact. That's why you started everything by saying. That's why you started everything by saying you can't violate the Constitution to enforce the Constitution. That's why you said that. And so you're trying to map on the fact that the Supreme Court. You're trying to map on the fact that
there are multiple problems with what Boasberg
Oh my God!
No, hold on. Can I bring it back real quick because I don't want to lose the audience.
We're running out of time.
Because right now, and I think we're losing things. First, I asked Grok, the question of, is there an order that this person is a member of the MS-13 gang, right? Because it just said this. This is what Grok said, and you can put it on the screen right here. And this is what it says. And it's definitive. It says there is no court order explicitly declaring that he is a member of the MS-13 gang, which you guys were talking about is something that appeared in a bond hearing because they were trying to deny him bond. So it's actually, there is no court order specifically stating that can be found that's stating he is a member of MS-13. And they go through all the sources and all the links. And so just to be clear, there is no court order, but in court, it was argued that he was a member of the gang to deny him bond in 2019.
Thank you, Grok.
But what would the remedy be in this situation? What is the remedy?
I don't know
Forget
that there
about
is
what all
one.
happened in
It's
the
too
past.
late. He's
Let's
gone.
talk about what?
Well, let me ask the lawyer
late.
something. Let me ask the lawyer something, especially you, Pisco, because this is this is what I think the legal issue is going to be. It's a standing issue, right? You have an injury, you have causation, the government causes injury, but the redressability, I think, is where we're getting wrapped up.
Yes, you're
right?
absolutely correct about that.
And you're saying that yes, they can achieve redressability, but in actuality and legally, they can't. So in other words, I if I was the Supreme Court, I would have dismissed this, even though I know they didn't. I want to make sure I would have dismissed this on the standing issue because I can't give an order to. I can say you can facilitate, but I can't give you an order to say this country must give this person back. You understand what I mean? So
it is redress. No, it's a good analysis. You're focusing it more on the jurisdictional angle of Article 3 standing.
Yes.
That's a fine way to conceptualize it. I think you can also conceptualize it as sort of what can the court do to solve this injury from an Article 2 perspective, and like what are the limits to what the court can order and infringe on any Article 2 power. So I like that analysis. It is the case that there was a legal wrong. It is the case that the court has jurisdiction, to hear it. What can the court order them to do? And I agree. There are some. You guys brought up some good examples, right? I think Eric brought up a good example of like, what if he's in Russian prison, right? Or what if they're, you legally send someone to Russia and now Putin has them? Can you like order them to or sorry, that was Nate. Sorry. Nate, did you say that? My bad. So I can think of scenarios like what if. So I can think of different scenarios where that would be problematic, but this isn't like that, right? One of the key holdings of the lower courts is that this is more like a contracting relationship. There is some authority here. There actually are some steps that you can take. Just because you can't guarantee that you'll get the ultimate relief you seek, which is to have them be have them be back in the country, doesn't mean that the court couldn't order things that could fairly lead to that happening. And so, for example, I don't think that the court could order an invasion of, this is to address MLS's point, which I think is a good one. I don't think that the court could order the president to invade El Salvador. That's way beyond its authority. I don't even think that the court could order them to
facilitate. They literally said facilitate. You have to give every bit of offer to where, hey, we'll take him, we'll pay for the flight, we'll make sure he gets here. But beyond that, if El Salvador doesn't want to give it up, you're screwed. Everybody's screwed.
Do you think they can even order him to negotiate with El Salvador?
I think that they can order them to ask.
That's the thing.
I think they can order them to ask.
This is the scary thing, right? Because I want to go to Kurt a little bit. Kurt Uncivil, he was here earlier. He was talking a lot about this. And the scary thing is that let's assume a U.S. citizen is in El Salvador. All right. And let's assume that there's international treaties on whatever. Can the court order the Article 2 branch to bring that person home? The U.S.
citizen? I think so.
I don't think they can. I don't think they can.
I question their authority.
No, a U.S. citizen, I think it's definitely much stronger than telling them to bring back a foreign citizen. I mean, I think we're talking apples and oranges here.
I still don't think they can, though.
I think the remedy in theory, if he would start moving citizens, would be impeachment. But there's no, as far as authority that the Article 3 has over him to direct him how he's handling it. These are powers he's entrusted with. If he's doing a nefariously terrible job with it, then and he's breaking the law, then impeach him.
But the Fourth Circuit said that's not true, right? The Fourth Circuit said that's not true. The Supreme Court said it's not true.
The Fourth Circuit wrote a love letter saying, please listen to us because you're going to make us look disrespected and you're hurting the court, and that will also invariably hurt you too. They wrote 4 pages on and on about how if about how Alexander Hamilton wrote this, and all this poetic talk about how we need to respect each other, even if we're critical of each other, and we invite your criticism. We love when we get criticized because it keeps us on our toes. Literally,
so
a quote from this ridiculous thing.
But I bring up the U.S. citizen in El Salvador for a reason, because I don't think the courts have the authority to order the president to do that, even with a U.S. citizen.
That's true. They
Why
can't
would
say
they
how
have
to
the
run your
ability with
army.
an
Or
El
whatever.
Salvadorian citizen.
Let Pisco get his side here, 'cause he's been
Yeah,
done.
wait. Yeah. So they couldn't order the president to ask. They couldn't order the president to stop paying the administration that is holding a U.S. citizen wrongly that they illegally sent over.
Pisco. Well, I'll ask you, Pisco. In any particular court case, right? Especially we're talking about standing and redressability again.
Yeah.
If the court says, well, you can't get this X company to pay you $1 million, we can't order that, but we can ask them, they're going to dismiss your case because they don't have the authority to get the redress that you want. And here you're asking for them to ask. But
So it
technically,
depends, right?
you would have to also give up in your argument. You would have to give up the fact that because they can only ask, they then don't have standing because they can't order the redress. They don't have any authority to order the redress. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So no. So first of all, I don't concede that asking is the only thing that they can ask them to ask the administration to do. Okay. I think they can also order the administration to stop funding in this contractual agreement with and to cease and desist all. It's also an illegal payment. So I think there are other things that you could order them to do. But even just that, right? So we can have different cases. That's why I started with this question. You guys didn't want to answer it. If Trump actually asked a genuine ask, wanted him back, could he get him back?
Absolutely.
Yes.
But would you actually want the?
So isn't it condemnable? Right?
Let me ask you. I'm asking a question. Would you actually want the court to have that power? Even what you're suggesting here, I'll tell you why it sounds crazy. Because to me it sounds insane. I'll explain to you why. Because imagine now he says, you know what, El Salvador, I'm not going to pay for his imprisonment there. And we're going to stop that. I'm going to breach my agreement with you. And that triggers an international incident where a month later we're at war with El Salvador. Do you think that those are powers that the judicial branch was ever entrusted with under the Constitution?
Yeah, just because a judicial order could trigger an international conflict doesn't mean that it's without the beyond the authority of the court. I can imagine a lot of things. So for example, if the court ruled that Mahmoud Khalil has to stay in this country, and that he can't be deported on the basis of his First Amendment activities, then like the administration's argument is that would have a serious policy consequence. But if the court ordered something like that, and it happened to be that there's an international consequence because Mahmoud Khalil is allowed to stay in the country, that wouldn't mean the court's divested from that authority. So
what
just
is the actual court's authority? What is their actual authority?
Article 1 and Article 2 only. It is not for an Article 3 court and it's not even an Article 3 court. They're a lesser court, right? So it's not for their jurisdiction. It is left exclusively to the president and to Congress to ratify treaties. And so the court has no authority over international affairs. They just don't.
Well, the court literally doesn't agree with you. So the Supreme Court said that. We have a 9-0 holding that says that the president, the administration, the defendants must facilitate the release from custody in El Salvador. And so your jurisdictional arguments lost. They lost 9-0 in the Supreme Court. And so what more can I do to show you that the court does have jurisdiction?
What we're saying is that you're right. All right. So all right, what I am saying, I want to put a words in my else's mouth. What I am saying is you are 1,000% correct. We lost 9-0. You're right. But in practice, because then you raised the practice of it, Trump could just ask. And I'm saying, okay, yes, Trump could just ask to get him back. But then I responded to your assertion by saying, but even though with this order, you still can't get the redress through standing. They can't order. They say, try as hard as you can. And then I responded to you in any other case. If the court can only tell you to try as hard as you can, then guess what? They're going to say, we can't hear your case because we can't get you what you want.
I don't accept that. No.
I agree. That's the tension that we're having here, because we're all saying everything else, because you're arguing the underlying facts, we're saying everything you're saying on the underlying facts is wrong. We're saying you're correct. But we're saying at the end, though, the point that we're at is that they can't do.
I have
anything
two responses to
actually
that,
get him
Nate.
back.
So,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the first response is that if Trump asked, everyone here agreed that he clearly would, a genuine ask, it clearly would redress because he clearly would be able to get him back. So number one, the point about it not being redressable because the ask wouldn't guarantee him to come back, even if that were the standard, it's obviated by the fact that everyone here agrees that if Trump genuinely asked for him back, he could come back. And so it would be redressable by that.
No. That's not
Yes,
what anyone said. No one said that. No one said that. What they said, if he wanted him back, that he could find a way to get it done. But what steps he would have to take, and this is the critical part of this. Trump can get it done if he really wanted it done. But here's the point I really want to get to, that I think is important for us to flesh out here. The Supreme Court told Judge Zinnes, go back and clarify your order, because you wrote facilitate and effectuate, and they said you need to clarify what that means. She didn't clarify what that. Read the decision. For crying out loud, read the decision.
You're wrong.
Instead of clarifying it, she just took out the word effectuate, which now leaves you in this amorphous term. What does facilitate mean? And I'll tell you right now, it's plain and simple why neither she nor the Fourth Circuit defined facilitate. Because if they define facilitate, they have to start getting more technical as to, are you asking to negotiate? Are you asking him to stop making payments? Are you asking him to evade El Salvador? What do you mean by facilitate? No one knows what that means. And the reason she won't put that on paper is because whatever she puts on paper as to the steps she's demanding that this administration would take would clearly be a violation of her Article 3 powers. If you can't spell it out, you're struggling to spell out what it is.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
You're saying it means ask for him back.
I'm not. No. Sorry. No. You misunderstood. I did not say that facilitate means ask someone back. That's not what the term facilitate means.
What are you saying? And
I just want to be clear where you're wrong and what the Supreme Court said, and then I'm happy to give you, my usage of the term facilitate and what I think it means. The first thing to note is the court did not ask the district court. The Supreme Court did not ask the district court to clarify the term facilitate. They just simply did not. The only thing they asked to clarify was the term effectuate. And what the judge in the court did was take out the word effectuate. So when you say that the Supreme Court said that the district court needed to clarify what is meant by those terms, they only said that they needed to clarify one term, that is effectuate. They did not have to clarify what the term facilitate means. Facilitate means to help bring something about. It's an active verb, meaning generally to help bring something about. We'll get to that. So that term is very general. That's true. The question is not what facilitate means. It's what's the limits of the Article 2 powers, and how much can you try to facilitate before you're infringing on the Article 2 prerogatives. That's what's at issue here. But to be clear, what the Fourth Circuit found was they can't do nothing. And to facilitate what exactly, right? What the Supreme Court said was clear. To facilitate, and you guys can look at the opinion. If you think that I'm wrong about the phrasing here, look up the opinion, all right? If you say I'm wrong about what the Supreme Court said, look it up. I'm right. To facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador. That's what needs to be facilitated, so says the Supreme Court. Facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador. And so sending planes does not facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador. They can't just do nothing. And think about what Pam Bondi said. Pam Bondi didn't say we'll send planes. It said we'll send planes once he decides that he's going to release him, once they decide to let him go. But that's not what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said you have to facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador. And they're not doing that, and they have to.
Custody in El Salvador, so you send
I'm not sure that's what the Supreme Court meant by facilitate.
One thing I want to do, I want to give this topic 2 more minutes. Is anything pressing we want to say? Because I know we have the last one's going to be a freaking bomb.
Oh no!
So
I don't know if we're going to get a last one. We're already over. We have 15 minutes left.
Oh no! I just want to say pressing. This is the pressing thing that I want from you guys, because listen, I love these conversations. I know this part got a little more acrimonious in the first part. I think I know it's laid back law, and I'm I just like the back and forth.
You're not very laid back.
Oh, it's never laid back. You don't watch the
show. No, I do appreciate the back and forth, and some of you made really good points, and I appreciate you for them. This is what though I would like to see. Can't we all at least condemn what Trump is doing? Ask him to bring him back. Isn't it the right thing to do? No. Regardless of whether the district court can order it, it was illegal.
Look at how twisted and nuts. Look at how twisted and nuts you are.
So here's my position:
get back an illegal alien.
If I was in Trump's position, I would ask the president of El Salvador, please send him back. Then we put him in jail. Then we go through the rubber stamping process, and then we deport him again. That's
Well,
it.
okay, but if that's your position.
I too agree with that. I too would say, because you asked the panel, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, I too agree with that. I believe his rights were violated. I believe his due process rights were violated. I believe he was deported illegally. I believe he should be brought back and should go through the process, because I believe you know. And what I would say
And
is
Trump should do that.
If they deport him, yes, and Trump should ask. But I also think it's a vacuous ask, because I assume we're saying he really can get him back, but I also think it's vacuous in the sense of Trump could ask and they could legitimately say, hell no. Then the court order would be nonsense. So, but I think the best possible scenario for this would be for him to come back, go through his due process, and get deported in a proper manner.
Well, I
think he should be paid $50 million and U.S. citizenship. I think Congress should pass a law. I'm not going to go that far.
We kind of
I think Congress should pass a law.
I have a rumble rant.
I think Congress should pass a law granting him citizenship, and they should pay him $50 million.
Yeah. Of course you think that. That makes total sense.
No, I'm hoping that you're going for hyperbolic, but maybe
no, I'm serious.
I can see him getting paid for the.
Well, first of all, Congress cannot pass a law to specifically benefit an individual. So
you can. They used to do it all the time.
Why? I'm asking you. Maybe I'm missing something here. The reason he got this stay was because he was under threat from the 18th Street gang, which supposedly the facts supposedly are that gang is no longer in existence.
Okay.
Well, so that would be covered, I think, in the due process, and I think that's what people are arguing.
Here's the question I have. I understand.
Yeah.
And that technically, there's a court order which has not recognized the fact that the 18th Street gang has been disbanded and is no longer a threat to him. So I'm going to ask you, if that's the only issue of fact to be resolved, why does he even need to be in this country in order for that issue to be resolved? That's a fact finding. Do they exist or do they not exist? Why does he even need to be here in order to have that due process completed? I'm not asking this as a gotcha question. I generally don't understand why his presence is needed for that.
So his presence is needed to right a legal wrong that was done to him. So
you're saying justice, but it's not procedurally needed.
To assess his withdrawal.
I misspoke. Apparently, with regard to citizenship, Congress can, but that's one of the limited exceptions.
You wouldn't necessarily need his physical presence to do a country conditions analysis with respect to the basis of the withholding of removal. I'm not saying that you necessarily need his physical presence, but he's entitled to it. Why? Having a physical presence lets you interact with your lawyer as opposed to not at all, right? He doesn't have regular contact with his lawyer to develop his case, to make an argument about the country conditions, right? So there's
a great argument against bond.
So if you have an argument, the government is supposed to present facts to the immigration court to assess whether or not the basis of withholding has been, obviated at this point. But there are a couple issues here, right? If he's not given the power to interact with his lawyers because he's in a fucking dungeon in Sakat, sorry for swearing, my bad. I can't. This makes me passionate. Yeah, I know. I will. I'll work on it. Because he's in Sakat, right? Then his ability, right, to properly leverage and argue against the country conditions analysis of the government is going to be prejudiced if he's stuck in Sakat, and he is stuck in Sakat. His ability to develop any facts, right? Because
it's not about his involvement with 18th Street gang. If we related to things relating to him individually and personally, I understand why he's necessary. But if in fact the objective of the government is to say this situation is no longer there. In other words, if that's just the fact of the matter is the building you were worried about was blown up, it's gone. The gang you were worried about his involvement with it is not related to this at this point.
Yes, it is. It is, because he could make an argument, for example, that sure, the 18th Street gang has been culled a little bit, but number one, I am fearing potential imprisonment in Sakat itself, because now Bukele knows that he says I'm a terrorist, and so in Sakat it's not safe for me, and I have a genuine fear of going to Sakat. That's number one, and so it could be specific to him in that context, which is that now the El Salvadorian government has it out for him, and they could throw him in Sukkot. In Sukkot, they mix and match gang members. And first of all, he's not a gang member, but even if he were, right, even if he were allegedly a member of MS-13, they throw him in with all the other gang members. And so he could absolutely still have a withholding claim based on that fact. He could have a withholding claim if he argued, for example, that, well, okay, they're generally gone, but there's still some people who specifically have it out for me, and the 18th Street Gang now knows who I am. I'm famous, and so they're going to target me, even though they're kind of underwater. I am now famous, and so I have a better claim for withholding. And therefore, even though generally it's been alleviated a little bit, a lot, or even a lot, let's say, it won't help me. I'll still be targeted for persecution, and the government's not going to do anything to help me. That's a fine argument.
I think this whole conversation is kind of irrelevant because the court order specifically said he shouldn't be deported. So I think you'd have to right that wrong, no matter what happened, no matter if you say, well, the gang is gone or whatever. The fact of the matter is he had the order that said not to be deported to El Salvador, and you're trying to right that wrong. So even if what you're saying, Joe, is correct, it's irrelevant to the facts on the ground. Well, you have to fix the due process violation before you then go into this factual basis, because right now the due process violation is what the Supreme Court is worried about. His due process rights were violated.
Okay, so next topic. What was the last one, Nate?
What was the last topic?
The last topic is Mahmoud Khalil and the Colombia, but that is going to, I know it's going to be a bomb. So just to be quick, permanent resident green card holder, married in the United States, leading pro-Palestinian protests, 2024, arrested March 8th outside Columbia University. April 11th, 2025, immigration judge ruled that he can be deported because Marco Rubio said that he claimed that his protest activity seriously adverse foreign policy consequences of the United States. Argument on one side is that his free speech rights are being violated, and on the other side is that his activities are essentially interfering with national not security, what's it called?
Foreign policy. Yeah.
So, is this a free speech case or is this just a regular deportation case? Remember, he is here legally, and he has a green card. I'll throw it to Joe first because we know what you're going to say, Pisco. But Joe, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, this is I predicted that when I was on Tim Pool's show 2 weeks ago with Pisco that he's going to lose if he gets the Supreme Court. That while illegal aliens have civil liberties, that their civil liberties are not to the same extent as American civil liberties, as American citizens' civil liberties, and that the free speech which he's claiming is a bit of a red herring, because at the end of the day, the immigration issues trump all of those claims, and they have a right. And this is an area where the Article 2 powers are at their zenith in these two areas, both with respect to immigration and with respect to issues of international affairs. That is the area that the Supreme Court has said over and over again that we should never be even interceding or looking at this whatsoever. The only thing that you're looking for is if there's a bona fide legitimate basis for what the government is doing. And once we establish that it's not that there's some personal bias against an individual or something based on racism, but there's a bona fide legitimate reason, we can't look any further. And that being the case, to try bringing up that, well, they're throwing him out because of what he said, and this is chilling free speech, and it's designed to chill free speech, that becomes irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, his free speech rights are not nearly the same. And the final point I'll make here is that when he comes here and gets a visa and then lies on his application to maybe have a valid green card now, maybe not have a valid green card. We don't have a finding on that as of yet. Obviously, I don't think we'll ever get to that point. That we now are in a situation that the individual's free speech rights are considerably lesser than yours or mine, because if he had expressed these same sentiments before he got here, he would not have gotten admission. And Rubio is basically saying that we're just going to hold you to the same standard when you're here that we held you to before we brought you in here, which is very logical. So all these claims about free speech are designed to muddy the waters, because people are frustrated with the fact that this is an area where the federal government has such exclusive powers.
Let me get David here before I get Pisco, because I know it's going to go into a war. Go ahead, David.
Well, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When you enter this country as an immigrant, you engage in contractual obligations. You can contract away some of your fundamental rights. For example, in a civil suit or in a criminal case, if you take a plea or if you reach a resolution, sometimes you give away your freedom of speech. You don't talk about the case, things like that. And so on a purely contractual basis, I believe the government is in a good position here.
Yeah, sure. I'll refer people to the debate I had with Good Logic and a bunch of other content that I put on the stream. It's clearly a First Amendment issue, and the deportation power doesn't make things not a First Amendment issue. So it just is the case that a deprivation from the government on the basis of protected First Amendment categories is going to face constitutional scrutiny. Now, it could be the case that Mahmoud Khalil loses at the Supreme Court. I don't necessarily trust the Supreme Court all the time. I think a lot of their decisions have been bad. But in general, I think that we should be wary of the power that we're, presuming the government to have in this case, which is to deport people kind of on the thinnest of First Amendment rationales. This would also support deporting someone because they, were in favor of Donald Trump if Joe Biden were in office, right? What if Joe Biden said, well, I believe it to be a foreign policy issue, that someone would support Donald Trump, and so I'm going to withhold all the green cards and deport people who support Donald Trump. I mean, it would be just as conclusive and preclusive, the decision, the foreign policy decision. The executive branch is at their zenith in terms of foreign policy decisions, and someone writes a shitty memo that, in conclusory terms, says, yeah, it absolutely would be a foreign policy a problem for people to support Donald Trump. It would jeopardize our relationships with so many different countries. It would jeopardize our relationship with Canada, and so because they're so mad at what he did with the tariffs, and so and the courts are supposed to defer to it, right? You guys would not accept that, right?
What was that?
Would you guys accept a deportation rationale based on someone supporting Donald Trump for president?
I don't think it's a good rationale because you're talking about America. Now, if you said they were supporting Stalin or somebody else, maybe, but when you're talking about another American, it's kind of like, I don't know.
Assuming the person's a green card holder too.
He's a green card holder, and he says, I love Donald Trump. I'm a big supporter of Donald Trump. And then Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, comes into office, and Hunter Biden's like, it is against the foreign policy interests of the United States to have any green card holder here who supports Donald Trump, given what Donald Trump did with the Canadians. The
problem is that I don't think it's a good analogy because it's not. You're talking about him supporting a terrorist group, and you're comparing that with Donald Trump. I mean, I hate it when when the analogies.
Okay, so Hunter says he's an insurrectionist and a terrorist, and
but
Donald Trump is.
I mean, technically.
Okay, but aren't you supposed to defer to what the executive says?
But Hamas actually is listed as.
But aren't you supposed to defer to the executive branch?
Yeah, that's what he's trying to bring up. He's trying to show how the allegation alone from the executive branch shouldn't be enough to have this type of thing, and he's saying that it should be looked into. Just because they allege it doesn't mean it's actually true. And that's bring the constitutional. Am I summarizing it well?
That's part of it.
Control over immigration policy.
Well, I think the executive has some control, but I don't think that they can violate internal constitutional provisions. So
they have all the control.
No, they don't. Well, the Congress has the control over immigration matters that they have granted to the executive branch. But if Congress could get rid of the INA, it could get rid of all the bases of deportability. It could get rid of admissibility. Those are all statutes enacted by Congress. And so Congress ultimately has the role here.
But they haven't. So right now, the administration has total say in how to handle immigration policy. And if you don't like that, every time we get a different president from a different party, the immigration policy changes, then we need to pass a new law. But right now, we haven't passed a new law.
So could you deport someone because they supported Donald Trump if he has total power?
Deport somebody if they violated the contractual obligations that they agreed to when they entered this country.
So what if one of those all of a sudden Hunter Biden, president, says supporting Donald Trump is against the foreign policy interests of the United States, and he says
ignoring the fact that there's a difference between.
Can you answer the question though?
No.
Can you answer it?
Because it's not a legit. I don't feel like. Pick a better example or more on point.
Why would you?
Because he's not a designated terrorist organization.
And he's not supporting somebody that we are actually in a conflict with. And it's not because we like Trump. It's because it's just a shit example. You can say Biden on the other way and still
the Confederate flag running all over inner cities. All right.
Yeah, you guys don't want to answer it because it's uncomfortable.
I will answer it. I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't like it at all. But I would say this. I disagree.
Would it be
with
legal? No,
Mark.
I didn't ask if you would like it.
No,
I assume you guys wouldn't like it. I'm asking, would it be legal?
I would say no. I would say no. It would not be legal. But I think
Therefore, the First Amendment. Therefore, the First Amendment does have an influence on deportation decisions, right? If it's the case, I just want to say, if it's the case that would be unconstitutional because it would violate the First Amendment rights of the green card holder, right? Presumably, then it is the case. I'm sorry. That's what I'm talking just with Nate, right? So if it's the case that it would be unconstitutional to deport someone on the basis of their support for Donald Trump on any basis, that means that deportation itself can't be unconnected to the First Amendment. There's an inherent connection to the First Amendment.
Ian, you walked into.
Can I respond?
Buzzsaw,
just to respond to Pisco. Pisco, I'm the one person on the panel who actually agrees with you on this topic. So everything you said is fine. It's cool with me because I agree with you. It's Joe that disagrees with you.
No, but do you guys?
I agree with you. So it's
okay.
Really,
so would
that
you guys?
Question would probably be better for Joe or for Dave.
So do you guys think it would be unconstitutional to deport someone on the basis of their support for Donald Trump?
I'll tell you this much: I'm not even sure that would be.
I don't think it's unconstitutional to deport anybody for.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it would be. I would think that's gross because he's not been designated a terrorist organization. But as far as being unconstitutional, I'm not sure why. If you try, you would try and justify it. You have to ask: does that meet the same threshold I've mentioned to you at least 50 times by now, which is the legitimate and bona fide basis?
But bro, every time you say that, I have a response, and I don't know if you're hearing it, right? I recognize that standard to be applying in the context of admissions decisions, not internal deportation.
And Dave is pointing out
the holding of the courts.
But Dave is pointing out that it's not simply an admissions thing, and it's not simply Dave. It's Marco Rubio. He said the exact same thing. Marco Rubio said the exact same thing.
Just to be clear on the law, there's a different standard from coming into the country versus when you're already in the country. If you're in the country, you have the protections. If you're outside the country and trying to get,
you don't even have due process outside
you
the
don't
country,
have due
right?
process coming in. So though there is a huge difference between coming in if you're out trying to get in versus if you're already in.
And that's my
point. So we're
point
talking
that
to a person who's already in. That's what we're talking
about. But the due process, you're going to be looking at the same yardstick of legitimate and bona fide. That's what I'm saying. When we're talking about how far you can examine, it's nice to say the words due process the same way it's nice to say the words facilitate and effectuate. But then you guys have to translate, what do we mean by due process? What type of due process are we looking at here? Are you looking at something that's virtually a rubber stamp, or are you looking at something you need to prove something beyond reasonable doubt?
Well, I'm looking
These
at the
are very far
constitutional
different yardsticks.
I'm looking at the constitutional standard of Matthews.
Yeah, Matthews v. Eldridge.
There's actually a test that you can go, and the lowest due process is notice and opportunity to be heard, and the highest is a trial-like process, like you.
And to be heard about what?
So notice and opportunity to be heard.
But that's what Nate just said. So
they give you notice that.
I understand what notice.
And then you get an opportunity to be heard by a third-party arbiter
about the breach of contract.
Yes, and that's the lowest form of due process. Well, hold on. You asked a very specific question. You said, "What is due process? What does it mean?" And I know exactly what it means. The only reason why, because I was teaching at a law school for 3 years.
Yeah, but
this is what it means.
It's not fully answering the
question.
Hell yeah, Nate. It's not. Nate.
How is it not answering the question?
It's not.
I'll tell you how it's not.
I'll tell you how it's not answering the question, because then once he has this opportunity to be heard, how hard does each side have to work in order to accomplish their ends? Meaning, now that they have the opportunity to be heard, now he's in front of a judge. So now what yardstick are we going to be applying here as far as looking at what the government is doing or examining the conduct of the government? That's why I'm saying that. So and I think that the conduct of the government is given in that opportunity to be heard, that the government is given very broad swath, and it's very difficult for any
only reason
green card holders to succeed there.
But the only reason Nate brought that up.
Folks, if you really want to get deep on this subject, there's a great 2-hour Culture War episode with Tim Pool. I highly recommend all of you check that out.
I do too.
We're not going to resolve that here. I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Runkle, it's great to see you, dude.
I got too laid back. I accidentally set my alarm off. Instead of snooze, I hit off, and then I was like, "Oh well." And
it's good.
Yeah, I was like, I wonder if they're still going, and they were.
I do deeply appreciate it. We've got to work on
organization. Well, it's getting feisty here because we actually,
my bad. Hey,
this is turning to Pierce Morgan.
I went through a
Legal
whole bag
style.
of popcorn. Just saying.
You look like Michael Jackson the whole time. The whole time.
It's great. It's great hearing people say, Nate, you're wrong. Nate, we hate you, Nate. We hate you, Nate. Because he hates Pisco. We actually love Nate. I'm like, okay.
Nate's the bridge builder now. I just want to say, I don't take anything personally. This was a ton of fun, Eric, and I really think that you guys were gracious. I appreciate you defending me and being like, having different voices. I know I can be a bit acrimonious. I'm getting used to like how you guys are doing it. Maybe I was a little not laid back enough, but I really do appreciate you guys like welcoming me into your space. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I do like different opinions, but I do want to work on like language and different things that it can be. We'll work on it. Okay. I'm no freaking expert at this kind of
You'll
thing.
see that after a couple of weeks, you'll be fun with it. You ready to do the outro? Do you want to get everybody out?
Yeah. Well, I want to know what's up with Ian.
Ian,
what do you have coming up?
Well, there's going to be a whole lot with Kara Reid coverage because I'm going to be doing recaps for that. But I also need this weekend. I need to get out and play with both a flamethrower and a set of night vision. So that's going to be a fun weekend. Although
not at the same time, I hope. Please don't use night vision and a flamethrower at the same time.
It might be at the same time because I didn't actually get my burn permit yet. They said it's too close to summer, which okay. So I got to test it out full of water. So that would work just fine with night vision. But they also want you to do a water test with it first.
Flamethrower.
Well, it's just if it's got a leak, you should discover that when it's full of water rather than when it's going to set you on fire. So
that seems fair.
So that's kind of my plans for the next little bit. And yeah, sorry for being late. I just saw you guys were still going and thought, I should pop in.
No worries. It's never a guarantee, and it's just kind of like a hope, and it's very informal. And folks were saying it's not laid back. It's an informal show. The idea is it's informal. We're not sleeping and we're not stoned. Well, I don't think we are, but it's informal.
Also, you can't get two lawyers in a room without having an argument.
Yeah. We're going to argue about arguing.
Wait, are you Canadian, Runkle or Ian?
Yeah. I'm Canadian.
What do you think about the debate?
I mean, the thing is everyone walks away from these debates saying that their guy won. That's just how these debates work. I mean, it didn't change my mind, but my vote is largely based on the firearm issue because I'm a firearm lawyer. And Carney is very much, he wants to spend over $6 billion seizing firearms from Canada, which to me is crazy because he's also going like, Trump is going to invade us. We need to not have any guns. And I'm like,
do you want to be the 51st state? Do you want to be the 51st state? Would you appreciate that?
I like this. I like the U.S., but I also like being our own country, right? And it just also I don't believe the 51st state thing at all. I don't believe that's an honest thing because he doesn't want Canada as a state.
No, too many damn liberals. I mean, look, it would work against him. It's like if you want a if he wants a Republican majority, bringing Canada in is not going to help him in the future.
I mean, at best, we'd end up as a protectorate. So, taxation without representation is not really what I'm down for. And at worst, it would, we might have less than that. So I am not really keen on that idea. There are some people in Canada, but they're a pretty slim minority. I think it's like 10% that are for that.
I'm surprised it's that high.
Well, in Alberta is probably higher.
Well, Alberta's not actually the highest. It's Saskatchewan that has the highest. But the thing is if you ask people a poll on any question, you'll get about 10% of oddball answers. So like if you do a poll like, does the moon exist? Not like, did we land on the moon, but just is the moon a thing up there? You'll get 10% of people going no, because they didn't understand the question, because they want to F with the poll or whatever. So 10% is that margin of just, bizarre answer. I've run into some people, but there's not a lot of them. It's actually kind of blown the election, Trump's stuff, because when you get an external threat, what always happens is people rally around the incumbent, and it makes it impossible for a challenger to prevail. Because essentially any criticism of the current state, which is what a challenger needs to do becomes sort of unpatriotic. And it's so basically Trump decided who won our election
How do you feel about that?
to the detriment of Canadian firearm owners, to the detriment of anybody who wanted to see anything different than the Liberal Party. You know, I know I'm going to piss off some of your viewers, but if he was playing 5D chess, he needs to go to a doctor to have the pieces removed from his nose because that was not, you know, it's just not a sensible play.
He has been good for your Liberal Party.
He took them from
off the ropes,
historic defeat to likely, you know, massive win. So
that's true. I mean, even Jordan Peterson's come out and said that it was ill-timed.
Oh, it was absolutely terribly played. So,
but Nate, what do you have coming up?
Going to get into the Anthony case, which is going to be crazy because we got all these. If you're on the left, if you're on the right, everybody thinks of these cases so differently. But I just want to put out. I'm just going to do what I usually do: put out the facts. And I do want to thank the people who have been watching the videos. Even though all these people in the chat will say they hate the videos, but all the people will watch. Thank you, because it's been a record week last week for the channel. I think it was like 7 to 8 million views. It was like some insane number. So thank you guys for watching. I'm glad you guys are liking the content, and hopefully I'll start mixing it up a little bit more with these guys. But really, I'm really appreciative, and hopefully you'll keep watching. So I hope the Carmelo Anthony stuff should come out by tomorrow. So
nice,
awesome, Dave. How you doing? What do you have
Good.
coming up?
So April 28th, I've got a new trial starting. Michigan v. Christopher Schur, who is a ex-Grand Rapids cop that shot and killed a suspect. He shot him in the back of the head, and he's being charged with second-degree murder. His defense is self-defense. So we had Andrew Branca on. Nick Staroff and myself are dual streaming it. We had Law of Self-Defense on last week to talk about it a little bit. And that trial is starting up in about a week, about 10 days. So that's what I got coming up.
Cool. And Joe, what do you have going?
We keep promising you the Karen Reed trial, and it keeps getting pushed back and pushed back, but they've seated the jury. They've slated 9 a.m. Tuesday morning because their court is closed on Monday. 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, we will be covering the Karen Reed trial. That's probably going to be going on for anywhere between 5 and 7 weeks. It's a retrial. The first time we ended up having a hung jury. Now, hopefully, we'll end up getting some sort of closure on this case. It starts 9 a.m. Tuesday. Every day, we'll be streaming the trial on my channel, Good Lawgic. I urge you to join it with me as I provide the colorful commentary that you've all grown accustomed to.
Hey, Runkle, instead of Canada becoming the 51st, will you guys just take Massachusetts?
Can you take Washington and Oregon as well? Yeah,
I don't
how
think
about we
that's-
give you states?
The thing is it's actually equally impossible for Canada to legally take on additional states as it is. Canada has a constitutional amending formula that is basically no. It requires a parliament to agree, but also 7 out of 10 provinces have to sign on, representing at least 50% of the population. And that will never happen. So it's basically impossible to reopen the Canadian Constitution, either to say we're now the US or to take on another state. So I guess the only way for it to happen would be for the US to invade Canada, dismantle the Constitution, and then recreate it as a new entity that is now Canada again, but with this extra. I don't see it.
All right. Well, you just gave Trump his marching orders, so we're good. We'll get that working.
All right. So, Pisco, I'm not sure how many are going to rush over to see it.
Yeah.
But what do you have coming up?
Yes, sure. So you should join if you care. My Pisco's Hour channel on YouTube. I'm tracking the authoritarianism and corruption of the Trump administration, all of their degeneracy. And so you can definitely catch, my coverage on that recently. We've been talking a lot about Mahmoud Khalil, about the corruption and authoritarianism related to Kilmar Abrego Garcia and other stuff that they're doing, right? They're corrupt bargaining with the mayor of my city, New York, Eric Adams, other corruption. So yeah, if you really want to keep track of all the horrible stuff that the administration is doing, you better follow my channel, and you better do it before I'm deported to Sakat. But thank you again so much.
Can you put your
Yeah.
link in the private chat, and then I'll put it
Sure.
in the main chat.
Oh, I
I
so
just
appreciate that.
subscribed.
Oh, thank you so much, guys.
Just to get people.
And then for what I have coming up, folks who like I don't know, what would we say, active discussion, be sure to hit subscribe below. I have another show called America's Untold Stories. Today we will be discussing the brand new released RFK files. This is new and it's a big deal. Everybody's been talking about JFK for a long time. A lot of the files have been out there with JFK and they've been poured over for many, many years. There's a ton of researchers. What we have going right now are newly released files about the RFK assassination. These have never been out there before. We got 10,000 pages. And spoiler alert, this will blow a lot of people's minds, but Sirhan did not kill RFK. He shot other people.
What?
He was in the room, but it's impossible to shoot somebody in the back of the head from being when you're in front of them. And there's a ton of evidence out there, and a lot of people don't realize this happened. And to give you an idea, the person who put my show partner Mark on the parole board was the person that Sirhan shot in the head. So Sirhan was there. He had a gun. He was shooting. He shot a person in the head. He shot other people, but he was in front of RFK. RFK died with a shot to the back of his head and his body. I don't know how Sirhan did that when he was in front of him. Anyway, that's hopefully there more documentation. Thane Eugene Caesar.
Thane Eugene Caesar?
Yes.
Is he still alive?
No, he died about 2 years ago, but he was the security guard that was new that night working with RFK, was right next to him. He sold his gun immediately afterward. Oops, hate it when that happens. And yeah, and hopefully now the evidence can come forth. This case almost got reopened, but the Attorney General of California put the kibosh on it, who happened to be Kamala Harris. So,
my queen.
Anyway, it's if you guys are interested in it, we'll be talking about that, and obviously other news that has happened during the week as we do on Freeform Friday. But we're very excited about the RFK documents because this stuff's actually new. These are documents that people haven't seen, that people can dig into, and we'll see where it all leads.
Nice.
On that note, everybody have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Godspeed.